right, here we are, Sub CLE. We have somebody other than a musician today, which I'm kind of happy about because I've been trying to get a wide variety of people and different demographics. So I think we're going to check off not a musician today. We have Ethan Lindenberger here.
Yeah.
How you doing?
Doing good, man. Doing good.
Good. I met you the other day, and we were having a conversation, me and my friend, and you gave us your 2 cents, which I happen to agree with quite a bit, and you're very articulate with the way you describe things, and most importantly, you kind of took my side of the argument. So
sure. That's why we're here.
So you had a TED Talk. You've been all over CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, talking about vaccinations. Ethan.
Yeah.
Where'd you grow up? What's going on?
Yeah. So we talked a little bit at Jukebox because I was just bartending. We were just talking for a bit, and most of the people that know about my story know that I am an activist for vaccines specifically, but my upbringing was much more humble than that. I mean, I wasn't someone who always was involved in the vaccine advocacy space. Growing up in Norwalk, it's a small town. Yeah. So Norwalk is south of Sandusky.
Racing.
Yeah. You got the racetrack, and it's south of Sandusky, so you have like a couple hotspots nearby, but it's still less than like 20,000 people, I think.
Yeah.
And growing up, I was really involved in church. It was just a small town, local Republican kind of community.
Right.
And I went to the public high school. It was a really like quaint, run-of-the-mill like small town upbringing.
Yeah.
And my mom and my dad, like they were involved in my life, pretty present, but both of them were pretty anti-vaccine.
Yeah.
And so I grew up not receiving any of the immunizations that the CDC recommends for kids growing up.
So like even when you were born, like you didn't get all those original. Okay. So,
yeah, and I didn't get anything.
You're still with us.
I am.
So shouldn't that be? Shouldn't you be an advocate for?
Yeah. I mean, it's a funny thing. I've had people say that before, where it's like, oh, if we didn't get anything, but you're 18, you're fine.
Yeah.
The thing is that like I said, Norwalk's a small town.
Yeah.
Right. So I grew up in a small town, no big airports nearby, no national travel. I didn't meet, someone who was from anywhere other than just like maybe Mexico.
Right.
Until I was like 18. It was a very, very small town with low immigration, like low, like disease rates. I mean, yeah.
I just want to cut in real quick and just say, I've traveled quite a bit, not as much as I would like, but I've always said, the people I talk to that have never really traveled, not even like outside of the state or anything, it's like their perspective is very small.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that in a derogatory way. I mean, I guess it's negative in some ways, but you know what I mean?
It's certainly true. I mean, talking about upbringing, I grew up in Norwalk. Right. So it's like my experience there was very much like living in a small town where there's no metropolitan influence. There is no like big colleges nearby to have like people from out of state or out of country.
Right.
I mean, genuinely it limits a lot of the aspects of exposure because most places on an economic level, most people on an interpersonal level, they meet people from other cultures through colleges and through work or through like travel, like tourism.
Right.
And so if none of those things are present in a small town, you're going to be in a very small echo chamber, small bubble, and you're going to have the same ideas circulating around. I mean, most people in Norwalk were white, most people were Republican, most people were Christian. So you're going to get similar ideas floating around pretty often.
Right. Okay. So growing up Christian, because I can identify with that. I was raised Catholic. I like to say, I mean, I'm, no offense to any of my family or anything, but they say they're practicing, but I don't think they really are. Because if you really followed the teachings of Jesus, I think you'd basically be a hippie, right?
Right.
But they're not. So, so did you, like, at what age, like, or if you still do, like, did you start to question those things?
Yeah, I mean, part of it is the internet is the main place of exposure for
damn
people.
Internet.
Yeah.
Ruining our youth.
I mean, exactly. It's quite the plight. But if you think about it, once you're 13, 14, 15, you start engaging more with an online community, you're going to start seeing that the world's a lot bigger than you originally thought it was, right? And you start experiencing other ideas, seeing a lot of debates going on online, and people like to argue on the internet. Right. So you start to see like some exposure to other ideas.
Right.
And for me, that was certainly true, where I started to question some of my pieces of my upbringing, some of the things I grew up believing, especially once started to see other ideas just out there.
Sure.
I mean, a good example of this is specifically with vaccines. When I was growing up and not being vaccinated, my mom would just say, "Oh, we don't vaccinate you to keep you safe," and we were like, "Okay." So we wear our seatbelts. Like, it's that simple. I didn't know there was a reason people did vaccinate.
Was that coming from a pastor, or where did they get this information from?
Yeah.
Because obviously it predates the internet.
It does, for sure. So my mom, like, for her, it was through, like, a friend, and it was through, like, a friend reading a book, and that friend read a book published by, like, anti-vax doctor.
Okay.
So a lot of it is kind of this domino effect, this Rube Goldberg machine of misinformation, and a lot of people believe things aren't factually true because they have friends that believe them. It's a big, statistically, it's most the driving factor of that.
Yeah.
So for her, it was a friend, and they told her, read this book, and she did, and decided against vaccinating her kids.
Okay.
Yeah.
It just seems kind of crazy because, I've heard the stories like this, and, I was vaccinated, I don't think, I don't even know. I can't even begin to tell you what my parents were thinking, But, if that's what I think my dad, whatever the doctor says goes, Guy's 72 years old, he listens to the doctor and, he's doing it, he's doing a lot better than me in a lot of ways,
Yeah.
But it's just weird, it would be so hard to go against the doctor. There's got to be some kind of ideology or something that is just so strong, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, so there's two sides of that, where if we're talking about what drives people not to vaccinate, and so my mom not vaccinating us and my siblings, it can be kind of confusing for most people because, they hear their doctor's recommendation and they place a lot of authority on a doctor's, degree and their intelligence, but there's also a bit of that deserves criticism. Just, I mean, it's a logical fallacy to just be speaking upon authority and be like, oh, well, this person's a doctor saying it, so they're right. And I mean, we've had medical professionals in the past promote lobotomy and promote so there's a part of me is very empathetic to people who question their doctor, and I think it's good to be skeptical of medicine, but empirically it makes no sense to question vaccines, which I think is the difference. Most people vaccinate because their doctor says so, which is good, but it's also like people can get things wrong.
Well, and if anyone knows me, I always say question authority.
Exactly.
Know what I mean? And for sure, and you should.
Yeah.
But I mean, when you get down to it, I mean, just if you, look at it scientifically, and I think Carl Sagan, if anyone knows him, he's got the, what does he call it? It's just ways to, figure out if something's true or not, whatever. He's got some fancy name for it, but. And it's basically the scientific method, and it's like when you see, and obviously peer-reviewed articles, journals, stuff like that, they even cite all their sources, they cite all the tests, they cite how they did the test, did this and that, whatever. But it's like you would have to actually physically go through and do all those tests, read all those citations, do everything just to actually see if it's indeed true. So for anyone to conclude for sure, it amazes me, so I just err on the side of, hey, this guy, I'm hoping this guy knows better than me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You try to do the research on your own. So when somebody even on either side says, "Oh no, it's for sure this way," I can't get behind that because I know for sure some of these anti-vax people didn't do the rigorous,
exactly.
Or
you have pro-vaccine people who don't really understand the research behind it, and they just go, "Don't question your doctor, just do what they say."
Correct.
Which I don't think is fair.
Right.
And it's also, here's a big aspect of that: a large demographic of people that are vaccine hesitant. There's different words for this. Hesitancy is where you're questioning. Anti-vax is where you think it's some kind of conspiracy.
Right.
A large demographic of the hesitant community are African American, and the reason is because medical malpractice, misdiagnosis, and mistreatment largely has been predicated upon mistreatment of African Americans and this kind of racist, systematic oppression that we see.
And didn't have some eugenics too as well.
Eugenics, yeah, exactly. So there's a big part of the idea that just trust your doctor, but it's actually kind of racist in a way where it's a large majority, a large demographic of people that are hesitant have genuine concerns because of things like the Tuskegee syphilis trial, right? And actual medical malpractice that black people have suffered from.
Right.
And so us as like, white dudes being like, just trust your doctor, that's
Yeah.
actually not really fair.
Right.
And so for me, like when I was doing a lot of research into vaccines, I was asking the question of just like, what does the science say? Like unbiased, unfiltered, like pure like results.
Right.
That's like the thing that matters. It's not as much your personal experiences. It's not what your doctor says.
Yeah.
It's like, can we look at a study that looks at more than like a couple thousand people, and like, is there something true here? And every single study has been like, vaccines are effective.
Yeah. So yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's so many years and there's so much data and metadata. That's what really gets me is the metadata.
Yeah.
Because that's when you really can tell if something's. That's why you'll hear scientists say, "Well, the evidence points to this." No, they never say definitively, and that's how a lot of people that argue with scientists can get away with it. Well, they don't know for sure.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But they know a lot more.
Everything's a theory. Everything's a theory in science. But it's like we have like theories like the Big Bang Theory, right? That are like, we're 100% right. But it's like, it's reductive to use other like language, and to say it's a theory is like, it's testable and observable. That's the idea. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, right. And that's the thing, if it's testable or not. I mean, it's like Santa Claus. I mean, you can't definitively say yes or no.
Right.
Whether or not
you can test. Yeah, you can test to see if presents arrive on Christmas. You can't observe it. So it's like, maybe Santa's not real. We're missing a part of it. Exactly. Fun, it's a fun little, because I think that's how a lot of people also treat science.
Yeah.
And they treat things like vaccines. And so kind of like for my experiences, when I was realizing that my mom was incorrect in a lot of this stuff, I could have said, oh, my mom, she has the best interest for me. She probably did the research. I trust her. Or I could say, no, like I have to have the authority to decide what I want to do for my body, and like to look at the research myself, because people can make mistakes. And when I was like, she's wrong, and I got my immunizations, so it kickstarted like my story, right? And when we're talking about like what she believed and why, she would say, oh, well, I have a friend whose son has a stutter.
Right.
And his mom said that stutter, like, it probably came from the vaccine.
Right.
And it was like, okay, we're branching really far away from studies and science. Now we're talking about anecdotes. And that's what drove a lot of like her decision making.
Well, anecdotal data is real to people because they actually see it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But like, correlation does not mean causation.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So, but I want to get into this. I do. But I want to go back to the small town.
Sure.
We got into the meat and potatoes. I wanted
Sure.
to get to I wanted to bring it up there. But so the small town, God-fearing people.
Yeah.
Did you start questioning God?
Yeah. So a big part of that actually, is a piece of the story, was before I was involved in my vaccine advocacy work and the science work I do now. So I'm a journalism like student at Lorraine County. So this is like what my life is, is like the journalism, the science, like this kind of thing. Before that, for 7 years, I was training to be a pastor.
Okay.
And so my
big difference.
Big difference.
Those are two completely different. It's like
yeah. No, I know. I think about that often.
If you think about it,
I for 7 years was dedicated, like goal in mind, to become a pastor.
I just wanted to qualify that, because one says don't question anything and one says question.
Yeah. Well, and so and to kind of like put a bit of an asterisk on that, it's that like I was going to be a pastor and I was interning for a church for 4 years.
Yeah.
But the church I went to was very non-denominational, very like liberal, kind of modern church. A lot of it was like the more fundamental, like we hate gay people, but we're going to paint it with a coat of welcoming people into our church kind of thing, where like we're not going to be open about that. That was the vibe I got, like especially internally. But I was, the reason I was so attracted is I grew up, in church. Yeah. I was articulate, well communicating, like smart kid. So I was like, okay, well, being a pastor makes the most sense, and I love community. I love people.
Yeah.
So I would love to be involved in this space. But when I started getting involved in vaccines, like you said, it's a big dichotomy here of like question everything, don't question everything.
Right.
And that became that had a lot of conflict to it, where when my vaccine work started taking off a lot, I was going to medical conferences and speaking in front of like hundreds of scientists about vaccines. Yeah. And I would come back from those conferences and the head pastor of my church would be like, hey man, are you spreading the gospel at these things? And I was like, no, because it's not about that.
Yeah.
And they would get mad at me. And then also there were people within the church locally who would like tell their kids, oh, Ethan's never teaching you in small group. I'm never letting Ethan teach my kids in small group because he's pro-vaccine. And would like go around congregations basically just talking shit about me.
No shit.
Yeah.
And you were still like believed in God.
Still involved
okay,
for almost 7 years of my life. And so it was like more than a third of my life has been dedicated to this.
So they kind of pushed you out.
Oh yeah. And so and part of it was also not even just a selfish like, oh, I'm being harassed by people. It was also like a realization of this community is promoting like this very obedient, like non-questioning kind of like dogmatism.
Yeah.
And I want to be someone who promotes actual science. I want to be someone who promotes like welfare and equality and equity and like kindness.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing how a lot of this is just BS. It's like, come to church every Sunday morning, do your little song and dance, go home, and nothing changes.
Right.
And it was like, I would rather be pushed to be a good person. I'd rather be challenged to be a good person. Like to embrace the ambiguity of life and to also like do something that actually matters. And so for vaccines, like people's actual lives are being protected and potentially even saved if they like came into contact with a preventable disease. But then my pastor's telling me I'm not doing anything important if I'm not talking about Jesus. Like, makes no sense.
Right.
Like you said, Jesus would be a hippie.
Right.
Jesus would probably also want people to live long, healthy lives.
Right. Yeah.
So, like, how is this not, like, the most Christian thing of me to do to promote medicine?
Or does he want you to go to heaven quicker? I don't know.
Exactly. And so also, like, in terms of studies, I'm, like, a very math-driven person.
Yeah.
And so I was seeing just, like, naturally through, like, looking at vaccine evidence and studies through, like, religion, religiosity or like religious practice increases during times of war and increases during times of economic stress.
Absolutely.
Like people flock to religion during times of disparity or disenfranchisement. And when you also look at like the way that religion, there was a really interesting study I looked at where the more dogmatic religious beliefs, the more dogmatic you are in your religious beliefs and staunch you are, the more likely you are to use violence to prove your religious beliefs.
Is that right?
Yeah. And so like the idea is that on an empirical level, people that like have like these very dogmatic beliefs and maybe even don't really personally, especially if they don't personally agree with these beliefs.
Yeah.
If they're like, oh, I don't really know how I feel about the death penalty. Well, how does God feel? No, God approves the death penalty. And there's like this disconnect.
Yeah.
Those people especially are more likely to use violence to close the gap. And it's like a thing where on an empirical level, religion is like an answer and like a system that attracts people who are unsure of how they feel about life, attracts people who are like not sure in themselves or maybe just inherited those beliefs from their parents.
Right.
And it's also really often manipulated by very systematic religions, you know? You can be Buddhist and like no one's going to freaking care. Doesn't matter.
Well, yeah. Well, we can get into that. But yeah, that's not really a religion. You know?
It's a philosophy. Yeah, exactly. So I pulled myself away from a lot of that and really just left behind the small town upbringing of being like, this is so like, everything's bouncing back off each other. Yeah. Everyone says the same thing on repeat. It's just like a record that's just spinning around in a circle. Yeah. And I was going to college for journalism. I moved out to Elyria. I live in Elyria, but I work in Cleveland, and I've never been happier because I meet people from all different walks of life.
That's awesome.
And I'm someone wwho like loves to hear people's stories. That's why I love journalism. Mm-hmm. You know. Yeah,
I don't like listening to people talk at all.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But anyway, go ahead.
No, you're good. It's just like, so like my life as an 18-year-old. Like think about it. Like this is how I paint some people. I was 18, senior year in high school, goofy, nerdy, like doesn't talk to anyone, kid. I was really quiet. I was in a couple of college classes for writing because I loved writing, and I went to church at like 2, 3, 4 times a week. That was my life. And then just one.
Wow, that many times a week?
Oh yeah.
Really?
Oh yeah. I mean, like we're talking like Sunday morning, Sunday night, Monday afternoon. Friday for my internship, like, yeah.
Oh, because you were doing the whole thing.
Yeah, I was doing the whole thing.
Yeah, because I was going to say, well, I guess I would go to, like, they call it catechism, and, my mom would tell us to walk to church. She wouldn't go to church, but we had to go to church.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no. I was the only member of my family beside my brother that went to church, and, like, my dad was the one who kept being like, come to church every Sunday, and then it turned into he would sleep in and I would go to church, and it was like, and now I'm like, okay, I get it. Like now I'm like, makes more sense. But yeah, for you, like kind of having that exposure, mine was like dialed to like 100 because my brother went to like a dogmatic Southern Baptist like gay people burn like church where it was like really heavy like fire and
Right.
brimstone thing.
Right.
So I was exposed
Earth is
to all of
6,000 years old. That's it.
Oh yeah, and like
No.
women, it's their place to be behind the man, like wear long
Yeah.
skirts, like don't talk loud.
Right.
It was like scary, and so he was straight up like in like the cult side of things, like
Yeah.
drank the Kool-Aid, and I was more in like the contemporary version of church. But I saw all of it,
Right.
and after I like him and I both actually are atheists now,
Okay.
and so we're like best friends, and like we both came out of that community, which is really interesting.
Okay. Well, you know, you said atheist, and that's a term. That's an ist that I think I identified with for a long time. But it's like, you know, is of any kind.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it just I roll my eyes at because you know it's like once I really got into the whole science thing, it's like the Santa Claus thing. I can't disprove Santa Claus. I can't disprove God.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I can't. There. It just. It's not. You can't. You can't. There's
Right.
no evidence either way. So for me to say that I know for sure there is no God,
Yeah,
it's like saying I know for sure there is a God.
Yeah,
It's
well-
like the same. It's synonymous. To me.
yeah. So like having the assurance to say you know what's right and know what's wrong, it's the same thing. You know.
Yeah.
But it's also like labels are confusing and stupid in this way where there's atheist agnostic, there's a lot of different like
Right.
ideas there. My brother Noah and I, we've both talked a lot about how we identify as absurdist. I don't know if you're familiar with absurdism.
I'm not.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Absurdism is like this branch of nihilism, this branch of atheism or agnosticism. And all it is that there's this idea that we can't know for sure what's out there. We can't. Like there's no way to prove it.
Right.
But there's a driving force in us that is telling us to find the answer.
Right.
And that is the absurd. It's like the difference of like an inexplainable universe. An inexplainable universe, but a constant drive to explain it.
Sure.
And absurdism says, okay, we can either be nihilistic and say there is no purpose and just throw it away. We can say we're agnostic and shrug our shoulders, or we can be absurdist and say this whole little argument makes no sense.
Right.
I'm just gonna like choose to be happy.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna like choose to make my own meaning. And the imagery is Sisyphus pushing the boulder up the hill.
Yeah.
And imagine if Sisyphus was happy.
Right.
Imagine if Sisyphus was pushing the boulder up the hill and was like, "This doesn't fucking matter, but I'm gonna do it
Right.
anyways,"
Yeah.
and like have joy in it.
Yeah.
And that's like how actually I've identified a lot as being like, I don't really know. I think that there's probably nothing because like
Yeah.
that makes most sense for me. But it's like at the end of the day, no one has an answer.
Right.
So I'm gonna choose to give my life the meaning that it deserves and
Right.
like choose to be happy. Yeah.
Absolutely, and well said. Yeah, for sure. You know, just how am I trying to say this? Boy. I lost my thought.
You're good.
Go
Well,
ahead.
you're talking about like the idea of like it's difficult to be like it's hard to understand people who are dogmatic and know that they are right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, yeah, to know for sure, I think it's silly.
Yeah.
You know, this is what I was gonna
There you
say.
go.
It's like, you know, when I was a kid, you know, I really loved this dog or my cat, or when my mom was a vet tech and she liked to bring home animals a lot, so there was a lot of animals. You know, and it was like I always wondered what it would be like if he could learn to talk to me, you know? And that dog, I believe it had a consciousness on some level.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's obviously, you know, alive.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it has some kind of brain function, but no matter how hard that dog tries, it's not going to be able to talk.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you're saying is no matter how hard we try, we're not going to be able to know the answers to these questions.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's just not within our physiology. But I guess, you know, like I guess that's where more of a spiritual thing comes in, you know, because consciousness is not quantifiable.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I think that's where like that whole, but it exists.
Yeah.
And neither is spirituality. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? It's not quantifiable, but it because consciousness exists, I believe spirituality exists.
Yeah,
you know?
it's like I think therefore I am is like one of the most like keynote philosophical ideas of existence, where it's
Yeah.
like, you know, we have the ability to have thought and to believe and to have emotion and exist. And so there's something going on where like we have this capacity to experience life. Does that mean there's some altruistic God in the sky? I don't know. And it's like the only thing we can know is like our sense, our touch,
the stories we're told he's not altruistic.
Yeah, it's fair. You got you got a point there. But it's like, you know, there's also the difference of like the idea of intention versus impact, right?
Yeah.
We have this idea of like what the world's supposed to be, what the world is, but the impact is the thing we can prove.
Yeah.
So some people who are religious or have spirituality, I don't think that they're right. But if it makes their life better and they're happier, then good for you. The impact is what matters.
I totally agree.
People get caught up in the idea of like right or wrong versus like the idea of impact. And I think that there's belief systems, right or wrong, that are bad. Just the impact wise. I think there's belief systems, right or wrong, that are good. And I think it's about being a person who's able to judge those appropriately and say, oh, Jesus can either be this dogmatic, racist, you know, homophobic character, or he can be this loving hippie that like, you know, is welcoming and forgiving. And so it's about what you pull out of that, I think.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. You know, and I think unfortunately a lot of people don't think, you know, because it's that whole idea. I don't know if we were talking about it beforehand or whatever, but it's like we were talking about it, you know, don't question, you know, just believe kind of thing. And it's like, you know, when that happens, you know, like people can pick and choose, you know, it's like, you know, I know they say they're devout Christians, but they're all for like, you know, capital punishment or like, you know, war or, you know what I mean? Oh yeah, you know what I mean? Or stop those immigrants from coming in here. You know, that's not very Christian.
Yeah.
You know, that's not loving your neighbor, you know.
No,
you know?
And I mean, this is also a big thing with like growing up in a small town as well. I mean, like for me, I saw a lot of this on full display. Yeah. Where it was like you would have people going to church actively that you could tell there was like a glaze over their eyes of like, man, I don't know if I agree with this.
Well,
and like they were so entrenched in that community because it was the only community they had.
Yeah.
And my brother Noah, this is like a great example of like how much this is like how destructive this can be. Noah was like 17 and was having a crisis of faith, being like, I don't know if I believe this anymore. But and I pulled myself out of it. I was out of it.
Yeah.
And he was looking at me. I remember we were like,
so he can come to you.
Yeah, he was, and he's only a year younger than me. So so he's 20. I'm 21. He at the time he was 17. I was 18. And I pulled myself out of church. He was like, I don't know if I believe this anymore. And he's sitting there just crying. And he's like, I'm going to lose every friend I have if I renounce this.
Really?
Yeah. Everyone. Because it was his whole life. And like they also, here's the thing, the messaging was like, your non-Christian friends are pulling you away from God. Right. Your Christian friends are uplifting your faith.
Right.
So like the rhetoric was very much like get more entrenched in this community.
Sure.
So it's hard to pull yourself out. And he was like crying me like, what do I do? And I was like, listen, dude, I lost my mentor. I lost my friends. I lost my Sunday morning, everything.
That's something.
And so
for me, it was easy. I just kind of stepped away.
Yeah.
My family was like, well, he's the black sheep, you know, kind of thing.
Yeah, it's like, to most people, it's like you subtly pull out of it. You stop coming Sunday mornings. You stop coming to things. You might still go to Christmas with them. Like, you know, that's how most people it is.
Yeah,
but when you're so like deeply involved in religion, the best example.
Well, I mean, you have Noah, Ethan. I mean, these are pretty biblical names.
Yeah, exactly. And like, you know, for a lot of people that are more involved in like the religion of spirituality, the religion of like Christianity, so much of it is like Sunday morning, men's group, women's group, Bible studies, like youth groups, like you meet everyone through there. And so the community's so like involved that at a certain point you can't just passingly like show up every Sunday morning and not have it be a huge cornerstone of your life. If people are pushing you to, especially your family, your friends, like people on Sunday mornings being like, hey, come to this thing, come to this event. And once you kind of like drink that Kool-Aid, you are roofied, like you are asleep, like you are gone, and it's like it's scary.
You know, I think, I don't know if it's a, you know, a curse or a blessing, but it's like I never really. It's like as soon as I started to become part of some kind of community, I'm like, well, I start questioning it. You know what I mean? And it's weird how like I see people do it though, like how they convert their whole ideology like almost seemingly overnight, and that to me kind of, it was never really deeply grounded, I guess.
So I have a very, so this is something I've actually thought a lot about. there's this thing in sociology that's the idea of what predates what comes before what. So chicken or the egg kind of thing.
Right.
Is it personality or is it philosophy? Are there people who are kind people who find kind philosophies that attract them?
Right.
Or are there kind people who just get dragged into things and like the philosophy changes their perspective? Like, are there good people who find bad philosophies?
Right.
And that's a big question in psychology and sociology. And there's also some evidence, some cases of like one of the guys from the Manson family, when he left the Manson family, he became a devout Christian. Right. And so he switched to a new like idea.
It's like he needed that.
He needed something. Right. So there's a lot of people, and it's also why religion increases during times of war, times of disenfranchisement. So there's some people who don't have enough stability in their lives, an emotional level, that need a foundation that religion serves. There's some people who are just intrinsically like dogmatic, like white or black people who find religion and attracts to them. Mm-hmm. There's also just some people who they kind of like fall into it a little bit, and over time it erodes at them.
Yeah.
All things are true, but like I think most people are like you, like about half are like, this is a little weird. I don't know if I like this, and they kind of pull themselves out of it.
Yeah.
But there's also a lot of people on the other half that it's all they know.
Yeah.
It's all they know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that reminds me of something I wanted to say earlier when you were saying that, you know, a lot of the reason maybe you started questioning your faith and whatever and this and that is because of the internet. But the internet wasn't around when I started questioning my faith, you know. I had this deal, like, when I was 17, just severe panic and, like, just weird. I can't even imagine putting myself in that state of mind right now, you know what I mean? It was so crazy. But it wasn't until I started, like, you know, seeking and searching, you know, and I think it was, like, Taoism and Buddhism that kind of just reading it over and over and over and over again, you know.
Yeah.
And, you know, I trained myself to not be a specific ideology because, you know, Buddhism teaches no attachments to anything. So it's like you start thinking, it's like, oh, I'm getting attached to this. Oh, no, I have to detach. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think the thing for me, and I think it's similar to what you're describing, is this idea that like fully committing to one ideology is just kind of like enlisting to it.
Yeah.
It's like I'm giving myself away to it. I'm going to enlist into all the ideas, bad and good. I feel like for me that compromises what I think is true.
Yeah.
Because like we talked about earlier, no one can be fully right on anything.
Right.
No one's going to be 100% right. It's always going to question authority. So why would you just throw your life at something and like spaghetti at the fridge, like hoping it sticks and it's ready to cook? And it's like, and so for me, it was like when I started deciding like my values were like really searching, and there was like the idea of like absurdism, which is just like, hey, who fucking knows?
Yeah.
Just like try your best and create meaning out of things you love.
Sure.
I was like, okay, whoa. For some reason, this clicks for me. For some people, it is like Buddhism. For some people, it clicks. I think that life's ambiguity, though, is a great opportunity to explore. And a life's ambiguity and like the existential, like, I don't really know what's going on. That's a great opportunity to be like asking some questions. Be like, what kind of person am I?
Right.
Good and bad. You know, and start to like explore those things. Because if you're like a devout Christian and it's like, oh, the Holy Spirit makes you a good person. No, it doesn't. BS. Like being a good person takes a lot of hard work. Yeah. It takes critical friends and family calling you out on your shit and like working really hard on it and like asking yourself tough questions, not just praying and hoping that the fruits of your good works just start exploding out of you.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like that comic or meme, what do they call them now, whatever, you know. But there's a difference between a comic and a meme, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, whatever, but I think it was a comic and it was like the truckload. It's like, and it was empty and it's like your thoughts and prayers have arrived.
Exactly. You know? Such a platitude. And like this is also a huge issue we see with like the religious community that like we have in the modern day, kind of like either politics or like just everything, where so many like people, they put so much weight on religion and it does nothing. Like for you it might do something, but for anyone else it does nothing.
Yeah.
And there's also this unfair entitlement of like my religious beliefs are so right. I'm going to force your decisions and your life to change because of what I think is true. Right. And like that's a huge problem.
Well, you know, and I'm all about bringing people together, you know. It seems as though religion, it just, like you said, if you label yourself something, it gives you an opportunity to be opposite something else. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, I don't know if you have something to say
No, it's
on
a
that.
great way to put it. If you label yourself as something, you have an opposite. Yeah. It's like dogmatism, tribalism is a thing. It's us versus them.
Right.
For sure.
Yeah. And it's, and I just can't, I can't bring myself to, because like if I'm talking to somebody, it's like, politically I'll say, yeah, Joe Biden's an asshole. Well, everyone that likes Joe Biden hates me. Everyone that likes Donald Trump, that's the way it is now, loves me. But then I say I hate Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And everyone that likes, because I really don't like either one.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, and I don't pick a religion. I don't do anything. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm completely open to whatever,
Right.
I just don't think, not in my lifetime, I haven't seen a public figure politically do anything for any of us.
Right.
So, but I just, it's like I'm constantly leaving people kind of guessing, and it's like they don't know whether or not to be my friend or be my enemy, and it's weird because it's like it shouldn't be that way.
There's also a huge difference between being like moderate and being like I'm undecided or I see both sides of it, and being someone who has a belief and has a thought, but just being someone who's open to conversation.
Yeah.
Because if someone's like, "Oh, I hate Joe Biden, but I love Trump," I'd be like, "Okay, well, why? Like, let's talk about that." And I don't think immediately.
But that's so combative, man. Why would you ask that,
I don't know, man.
Why don't you just love Trump?
Exactly. I mean, I love Jesus, Trump, and guns. That's a checklist you need for Ohio. I think for most people, it confuses them to have someone willing to engage with something they disagree with, because for a lot of people, they have this idea in their head of like the straw man of like, if people disagree with me, they are these like liberal like, woke, keyboard warriors. And then if someone's just Republican, they're just this like racist, bigoted alt-right thing.
Yeah.
And both are super unfair. Yeah. And I think that especially the media perpetrates a lot of these like dogmatic divides of like what things are. And you can still think someone's wrong.
Yeah.
You can still think like, I still think my grandparents and my dad and most of my family are like super incorrect politically.
Right.
I love them to death though. And I can understand like how they came to those beliefs, and I can respect them as people, but I can also not think that their beliefs are right. And it's that balancing act. It's in itself ambiguity. Yeah. It's the ambiguity of how can someone think this that I love so much, and it's easier to say like, oh well, they're just bad people. It's so much easier. People don't like to explore those gray areas.
Right. It's like you have to choose a side.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think it was Bill Maher. It's like when it's like he was doing this whole like him and like Lawrence Krauss and Richard Dawkins, like about 10 years ago, they were doing this whole atheist versus they would debate like religious leaders and this and that, and it was like this big just fight between atheists and Christians and stuff like that or whatever. But he said, why can't I just say I don't know?
Yeah.
Why is that not an option?
Yep. Yeah, and it's like also on top of that, not even saying you don't know, but just being like, I'm not sure. Like, let me circle back around to that. Let me like explore that, and let's keep having this conversation. Right. People often want immediate answers, and they think that by like one-upping someone that they're like smarter. Yeah. And it's like I respect someone and think they're a lot smarter if they're just like calm demeanor, like maybe I haven't thought about it like that. And it's like, okay, whoa, you're definitely like taking in this conversation. You're thinking very critically about this rather than just waiting your turn to like hop on someone and like spew your idea at them. That's so, and I think that's why people get so exhausted by politics. It's like so much of what we see isn't a conversation. It's just this pissing match on like if someone has the more like compelling, destructive idea about the other person. Right. You look at Tucker Carlson being like, oh, let's blame like the trans community, let's blame immigrants, let's blame everybody, and then you look at CNN and they're like, Tucker Carlson is every Republican, and it's like Tucker Carlson is not every Republican. Yeah. Like this is like kind of the extreme of it. That's like a big voice. Yeah. So like everyone needs to pull back a little bit and talk to real people who are unsure, have a real life, they have an actual job, they don't have the time to go around being like, buying into this.
Well, it's funny you say that because like all of that, you remember, it was probably about 10 years ago, right around that same, I guess that was a popular thing back then, but like there was Crossfire on CNN. and it was Tucker Carlson and I forgot the other, Bagala, whatever. Yeah, I forgot whatever. But they had Jon Stewart on there.
Yes.
And I don't know if you saw that, but Jon Stewart called them out. He's like, "You guys are hurting America," you know. And Tucker Carlson's like, "Oh, you're supposed to be the funny guy." He's like, "No, I'm not going to be your monkey."
Yeah,
you know?
I remember seeing that. Yeah.
You know, and it right after that, Crossfire got canceled. You know,
Yep.
I mean, he really, you know, and he made a great point. He's like, "Why can't you guys just?" He's like, "Just say something good about him."
Yeah.
Why don't you say something good about him,
Exactly.
and you say something good about him? There's got to be something, you know.
Well, and what's so funny about this is that, like, in a very much full circle kind of thing, when I was doing a lot of my vaccine advocacy work, I would go to conferences and say, "Hey, vaccines are good, vaccines are safe and effective," and that was my platform. That was like what I was doing, like conferences,
Yeah.
TED Talk, all of that. And I would say like, "Oh, vaccines are good and safe and effective," and all like the liberal doctors would like clap their hands and be like,
Right.
"Woo!" And then I would like follow it up by saying, "Anti-vax people or hesitant people, they're not bad people. Like these people are probably they feel unsure, they feel unsafe, they're concerned for their kids' safety. These are the same exact reasons that most people vaccinate their kids, right? So we're seeing the same exact line of logic, just what's true is the difference." Right. And I would say that, and I'd say, "Hey," and I would have like panels on my slideshow that say anti-vaxxers aren't stupid,
Right?
And I'd have doctors come up to me afterwards and be like, "I still think you're wrong. I think anti-vaxxers are dumb." Like straight up to my face, be like, "They're stupid," and it was like,
and that's an intelligent person.
Yeah.
They had to actually, going through school doesn't necessarily mean you're intelligent.
No,
That's why-
yeah. And it's, I think that dogmatism and that like us versus them, that like they're stupid, I'm smart, it comes from an exhausted, hurt place.
Yeah.
And people don't want to do the mental gymnastics of being like, okay, there are people who like are good people who are definitely wrong, or I definitely disagree with even, and maybe I also could be wrong. And it takes more empathy, it takes more like patience. And so I've seen that on display a lot. And so my platform was very much like a more radical kind of like, we need to not only like just masturbatorily just say we're right and say, yeah, vaccines are good and safe and effective, right? Anyone can do that. Also, though, we need to have a much, much more adult dialogue where it's like we're willing to hear people, educate them, show them why we're right, listen to their fears, and have a conversation. And people didn't want to even hear that. Like a lot of doctors would be like, "Psh, they're dumb," and it was like, wow, like how reductive is that? So reductive.
Well, you know, yeah. Well, well, let's get back into this.
Yeah.
But so you were. I want to kind of pick up on that timeline where, okay, so you were 18. You started going to school then, or what happened? Did you like leave home and your parents disowned you or what?
Yeah. I mean, so the timeline of events is kind of like, I turned 18. I wanted to get my vaccines. Story blows up, and NPR picks it up. Fox News picks it up. Good Morning America picks it up. Domino effect spirals out.
So this was when you're still living at home?
Still in high school.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I was going to like the U.S. Senate like with a packet of homework.
Yeah.
Like, and so I was like coming home from that, traveling a lot, and school ends. My high school senior year ends, and I'm still like everywhere. I'm still traveling globally, even to like the United Nations,
Nice.
and
was that Belgium?
Yeah, Belgium. Yeah. A global vaccination summit of 2019. The Queen of Belgium was 2 rows in front of me, and the Surgeon General and I got drinks, and like,
that's awesome.
Yeah, he was a cool dude, and like so it was a big thing, and I took a gap here from college because I was just so busy traveling.
Yeah.
There were many times where like my girlfriend at the time would like pick me up. I'd go to her house, spend the night, and then go to another conference the next day, like after getting back from a flight.
Yeah.
So I was just like everywhere, and then COVID hits.
Right.
And then COVID kind of like caused the whole world to pause.
This was all pre-COVID.
All pre-COVID. Yeah.
So you were like ahead of the game.
Oh yeah, and I actually said in my Senate testimony that the number one concern of the American people should be the medical misinformation that we're seeing right now. And that was a year before the pandemic hit, and we had like the worst outbreak of disinformation we've ever seen.
Yeah.
So it was like very prophetical in a way, where I was like, this is bad. And like I even had meetings with Facebook, Twitter, and Google, the executives of the companies in California, right before COVID. We were talking to them back in 2019 about how do you change your platform so misinformation isn't as promoted, so that way if something happens, like people aren't going to just be like swamped in things they don't know are true or not. And this was all pre-COVID, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, it was like that. That's kind of how it happened. And I moved out like after I started going to college. I live in Elyria now, and I'm fully independent bartending and like going to school. So like it was a bit of a weird balancing act of like living at home, but still like going to conferences and being like, my parents don't know what they're talking about. But at home, I would be like, listen, I love you guys, and I'm going to tell everyone I love you guys and you're good people, and that you are doing what you think is best, but I still think you're wrong. And they were like, okay, we think you're wrong too, so we're going to do our own interviews. And I was like, go for it. Yeah. Do it. Like, I encourage you to.
Yeah, it's just that media is not on their side.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big part of it. But my mom, she was on like the biggest like anti-vax talk shows on the internet, like hundreds of thousands of Facebook,
really?
like everywhere. And like they would have her on, they'd invite me on, I would politely decline and be like, listen, I don't agree with your platform. Like my mom obviously is cool with it, and I'm glad you guys talked, but I'm not like in your.
You didn't
camp.
want to go into the Lions?
No.
What?
Because like I think debates are great. I think like
I would have. Yeah, I'll do it.
I think me now having
You're
more
so
of an,
well spoken though.
Me now having more of an ego, I might have done it. Yeah, like but back 18-year-old Ethan who's like has no clue how it happened, like where I was even. I was like, I don't have the time to sit here and prepare for a debate.
Yeah. So you say misinformation. So we're current with your life, and then you already said it. You're working at Jukebox. That's over right across from Saucy Brew over in, the Shoreway over there, which is a really cool spot. I like that place, and maybe we can get into some bar talking.
Yeah,
I do some bartending myself, man.
For sure.
But so now that we're current, now we can get crazy. What is misinformation? Like, what is, like you said, all this misinformation and whatever. What was coming out that you said was misinformation?
Yeah, so there's two terms that are used interchangeably a lot that aren't accurate. So misinformation and disinformation.
Right.
Two very different ideas. Misinformation is the idea of being misinformed or miseducated, where you believe something that isn't true and even misled. It's the idea of just kind of like convincing someone they're right when they're not. Disinformation is the idea of intentionally spreading information that you, as like the person spreading it, knows that's not true.
Right.
So misinformation would be like, oh, I'm pretty sure that like Obama said this one thing a while ago, and you go on Facebook and say, did Obama say this one thing? And it's like, that's misinformed. Disinformation is saying like Obama was born in Kenya, and you know it's not true, but you're making Facebook memes and trying intentionally to hurt like Obama's campaign.
Right.
So there's a big difference in like how those two things work in the world. For vaccines specifically, it's a lot more of the disinformation. People like at the top spreading a lot of things that aren't true. Also, a lot of people misinforming small details, saying like, oh, did you know there's aborted fetal cells in vaccines? If you're pro-life, you shouldn't get vaccinated. That's very much misinformation because they're taking one idea and like kind of blowing it up out of proportions to like make it an idea that's not true.
Right.
So there's two different things there. Yeah.
Inflating something. Yeah. It's so, but what specifically was bothersome when the whole? So you were already in this vaccine talk,
right?
And then the pandemic hits.
Yeah.
And then you said some misinformation came out. What was that?
Yeah. So specifically with COVID, if we're talking about COVID era, after my vaccine work is coming on, we saw with COVID.
All right, just we're too.
Yeah, good.
We're too like, average guys, and let's just agree that before COVID, vaccines good.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Let's lay the groundwork there. Like,
okay.
It's like, so we have a cornerstone there. Yeah. Vaccines are safe and effective. That's good. But with COVID, when COVID starts happening, a lot of disinformation came around about the disease itself.
Right.
COVID's not dangerous. COVID is something you need to worry about. Don't wear your mask. Masks are ineffective. Masks hurt you. 5G towers are causing COVID. Like, a lot of these things that were so far removed from reality were being spread specifically because there were people who didn't want to stay home, didn't want to have these lockdowns impact them, and also a lot of people who were anti-vaccine back in 2019 and before, they were the anti-COVID people when the pandemic started.
Sure.
And so a lot of like the anti-science community that was like very anti-vax and like leading that charge led the charge against COVID and spread a lot of disinformation. My mom was an example of this. She fully believed that 5G towers caused COVID, and she fully believed that masks hurt you. And like, she bought into all this because the Facebook groups and the profiles and the influencers she was a part of were propagating those ideas. And so that was like a big problem we saw that genuinely killed people. Like, People actually died because they were not staying at home, they were not wearing their mask, they were seeing their family, going to parties, going to holidays, and their grandparents and their friends and those like parents' kids were dying.
Right.
And so like that was a big part of like the danger, was that disinformation of this dude being like, oh, my Facebook group that's like the anti-science Facebook profile of Facebook. If I spread this meme, I'll get a ton of engagement. People will freak out. People died. And like that was like the scary thing. And so that's what I worked against for a big part of my platform.
Okay. So it's like, whenever I wanted to say, like, whenever, somebody says something outrageous, I just kind of go, well, maybe they're right. And I assume they're right. And I approach it that way. Mm-hmm. And then I know I'm going to take the scientific approach.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to be like, oh, well, no, it is silly.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so the whole 5G tower thing, like immediately when I heard that, but I heard it from somebody that was like always into these weird.
Yeah.
Where Alex Jones gets it right sometimes, but there's just these weird outlandish Alex Jones kind of things, and I'm like, how is that even possible? I'm sure I can look something up and they're going to explain it, like we were talking before the podcast about flat Earth. You could watch a video on that, and it's very, very convincing. Mm-hmm. Or there's a whole nother world inside this, and you can get to it from Antarctica.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
It's the Nazis
so
run it.
Fucking convincing.
It's crazy.
But it's so not true. You know what I mean? If you know anything about like thermodynamics or any of those laws, this goes against physics in so many different ways. But I entertain it.
Yeah.
Just because, if you just tell somebody they're ridiculous, that's the end of the conversation. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So actually, we've seen a lot of like really big journalists on YouTube that have like taken that exact idea you're talking about and ran with it. Channel 5 News that used to be called All Gas No Breaks. No. It's his YouTube channel where Andrew Callahan, the journalist, he will go to like flat Earth conventions and just hold the mic up to people and be like, "Why are you here?" Yeah. And just let them talk. Yeah. And they are ridiculous. They are crazy. And like he just lets them talk. Yeah. And they make themselves look ridiculous. Right. And he just lets it happen. And he needs
do that with any subject though.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Like you said with even the people that are pro-vaccine, they don't really understand why.
No,
they
yeah,
just,
1,000%. And like I think that it's for interpersonal, like I'm in a bar talking to someone, it's very much better to listen for a while.
Right.
Let someone talk, let their beliefs get out there, and let them kind of like not only show you what they think, but how they think it. Are they
the power of a question?
Yeah. Are they dogmatic? Are they are they not willing to listen to you? And then you can kind of hop into a conversation if you want to, or you can just like let them run with it and learn something.
Yeah.
Either you learn something you didn't know before, or you just learned that person's crazy. And it's like it's a fun time to be like a mediator and be just like, okay, I'm going to pull away from this and let this fly. The only problem though is that if someone's like, kill the Jews, it's like, okay, we need to like shut this down. Yeah. That's where it gets like a little iffy, because if people have a ridiculous idea around the flat Earth, it doesn't matter. The flat Earth community has not hurt anyone. But it's like certain ideas that become violent or racist or bigoted, that's where like actual violence can take place. Right. And that's where you need to like shut those down. And that's also with medical misinformation is a big difference, where it's like, I'm totally a proponent of just letting people talk and pulling away and like letting them do their thing and like silently judging it and be like, okay, this person might know what they're talking about. Right. But when you're talking to a friend who's like, oh, COVID's not real, that's scary, because like they could be going around getting people sick.
Sure.
And like that's where it becomes a real actionable consequence,
So, I guess at what point does empathy end? You know what I mean?
Good question.
Like you want to be empathetic towards their opinion, but at what point do you go, eh?
Yeah, I think and this has like always been my policy on this, and it's such a good question. When does empathy end? When do we need to like put in like restrictions almost? Yeah. Public schools is a good example of this. You cannot go to public schools legally if you're sick. Like, if you know you are sick and you have a contagious disease, you cannot just go to public school. No. And if you were to call a school and be like, hey, my religious belief, my philosophical belief, my kid has to go to school. The parents of that kid, they might have every, like, authority and right to, it's their kid. They know that you can't put other kids at risk, though. especially in an environment that the government is facilitating, like a public school that the government is like promising other parents, we're going to take care of your kids and make sure they're safe. So it's like negligent upon them to let some sick kid come to school sneezing on everybody. Right. So a big part of this is that, like, at your own home, the walls of your own home, sure, don't vaccinate your kids. Do whatever you want. In a private school that has those policies, we can't stop them. But for like public places, like public schools, colleges, they have every right, and the government has every responsibility to make sure that they're being safe and proactive about that safety. And that's like where I think also business owners have every right to be like, you cannot come into our business or come to this concert if you are not vaccinated. And I think if like publicly that pressure is strong enough, people will be kind of forced into a position where they're like, their negligence has to be taken care of, you know? Right. So you can't be a negligent parent who does nothing for your kid in the society. Even though it's your kid, like, there are too many like industries, too many things in place, too many like laws that are like, this is your responsibility, take care of your kid. Right. And when it comes to like other people, we have a right to be like, hey, other people are impacted by this. It's a big thing. And the anti-vaxxers argue this a lot, where they say, well, if I don't wear my seatbelt, no one else gets hurt. One, not true. We're not wearing your seatbelt puts other people in danger because you can go flying through your windshield. Right. Two, vaccines aren't just personal protection, they're community protection. Right. So the community has a responsibility to ensure that the community is safe. And I think like if we lived in a world where those pressures were like understood by everyone, and so you can't go to a bar unless you're vaccinated, you can't go to a concert, you can't go to a public park, you can't, like, if those restrictions were there, it would, one, I think that'd be fair. I think the government has every right to do that because they're the ones facilitating those places. Well, business owners have the right to do that too.
I was gonna say differentiate between a private business and government. So you think a mandated vaccine should be?
I think for like college, like, we already see it for colleges. Yeah. We already have it as a thing. We already have mandates for schools. We already have mandates for colleges. The difference is that there are some states, this is where we get into the federal idea of it, different states have different policies on philosophical versus religious exemptions. So when you have a kid that's going to public schools, like 46 out of the 50 states allow you to use one or both a religious or a philosophical exemptions out of vaccines. California and more liberal states have neither. And so this is like the idea that certain more liberal states have the ideology of like, it's our responsibility to make sure the community is safe. More conservative states are like, well, it's the parent's choice, you know? And I think that, like, from my personal definition of like what the government's responsibility is, which is to keep people safe and to promote their wellness, that's like number one. Right. It makes so much sense that they should have that mandate in place. And if you're someone who's really staunchly anti-vax, then go to a private school. And I'll also add an asterisk to this, saying that the mandates of, like, you know, you can't use a philosophical, you can't use a religious exemption. Medical exemptions are a different thing. Medical exemptions are like totally, in California even, like you can get a medical exemption if your doctor says don't get vaccinated. So those like gray areas are accounted for on a legal level.
So, I mean, I agree with you. I just
it's an interesting point.
Yeah, but I'd like to, actually. So do you think that, because we can agree that, taking the vaccine, there is, even if it's like 0.0008% chance that you're going to die from the vaccine, right? Which is like anything, right? People that eat peanuts, somebody's going to die. You know what I mean? But shouldn't that be a choice, though?
Yeah,
I mean, because sure, you're doing it for the benefit of society, which I think ultimately, I mean, we're not going to live forever, but society hopefully could. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I get that, but like if you're that 0.0008%, that's like the most important thing ever if you die.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
And there's also like and I'll give very, very clear criticism to the pro-vaccine community. There are some people who are like, that's the cost. And it's like, whoa, don't, like, that's a really, like...
It's not very empathetic.
No, and when you look at it on a statistical level, here's the thing. The statistical level, most of vaccine injuries, quote-unquote, as a definition of people that have side effects from vaccines, come from fevers that naturally happen when people get vaccinated.
Right.
Any antigen reaction, any, like, immune system reaction is going to have, like, the chance of having a fever develop.
Yeah.
Fevers... It's where your body's heating up to try and get rid of a virus.
Right.
So what is one of the common things that can happen if you have a fever? Well, your body's heating up, so seizures can be a thing. Seizures are usually when your brain is overheated or there's some kind of misfiring and your body kind of shuts down. That's like kind of the definition of what seizure is. So if there is a possibility to get a fever, and then there's tangentially a possibility you have a seizure, and seizures, most people, they have seizures and they're fine. And there's even like acute, petit mal seizures, what they're called. Yeah. Petit mal seizures are when people have seizures throughout the day, and they kind of just pass out, like slump over, and they wake up. Totally normal.
Right.
Some people, very small minority, have seizures and they have lasting damage. And so when you start going down the list of things that can happen, if like you're super unlucky, there is a possibility that like you have a fever, you have a seizure, you have some kind of like damage to it. It is so unlikely. You're more likely to like be killed by like a coconut. Right. And so part of it is like, yes, your choices as a person really matter, but when it comes to the community safety, and it's so unlikely that happens, and it's maybe like 10 in every 10 million or like 100 million. Right. That fear is so removed from reality.
So I guess you can kind of put that up against what are the chances of dying from COVID, which is pretty small as well.
But here's the thing though, is that like with COVID, there's a huge difference in the terms of like the actual
it's
impact.
Higher.
It's like but you have a point. So statistically, it's unlikely to die from COVID.
Yeah.
Though, most people that get COVID, because COVID's a very transmittable disease, so a lot of people have gotten it.
Yeah.
Most people that get COVID have strong immune systems. They're between the ages of 16 and 50, where they have like most of their body still works pretty normal, right. and they're healthy for all intents and purposes. However, because COVID is so transmittable, when you start getting into like more dangerous, categories of people and more dangerous demographics, people with respiratory problems, people that are older, people that are younger, those chances of dying from COVID are a lot higher. Like, think about it in the way that like even 2% death rate is like bad. Like that's like having a 2% chance to die is terrifying.
Yeah.
And if you are someone who has like respiratory problems or is older, your chances are way higher than like a 0.1%. Like you're not just like rolling you're much more rolling the dice if you're like older and prone to that. And because it's so transmittable, that's where it becomes scary.
Right.
For people that also are getting vaccines, doctors will tell you if you medically should not get vaccinated. There's a huge community of people that are immunocompromised, people that have cancer, people that are taking immunosuppressants. They should not get vaccinated. And we don't roll the dice on them. We tell them, like, listen, it is an unnecessary risk for you to get vaccinated. Right. And if every healthy person got vaccinated, we wouldn't need to vaccinate the rest of that population. And so that's a big part of it, is that, like, with COVID, those demographics are more at risk. We can't control the protection side of things for them. If everyone's just getting COVID freely and it's like, I'm not going to get sick, I'll be fine, the mortality rate's so low, it doesn't really matter. You are really putting people at risk. Mm-hmm. People that have much more chance of dying. For vaccines, though, if I get vaccinated, I will be okay. There are some people that won't, but my choice is protecting them. And it's like it's easier to like work around that dynamic and tell them don't get vaccinated. We can make sure you're okay. And it's a very, very different thing,
So here's the thing, that I hear quite a bit, and I see some validity to this. It's can you spread the disease if you have the vaccine?
Yeah, so CDC kind of like studies into this have shown that a big part of like getting the vaccine and kind of correlating that with your transmission to COVID. So asking the question, can you spread COVID if you're vaccinated, or can you get COVID if you're vaccinated? A big part of like disease is the idea of mutation and different strains. Mm-hmm. We've seen with COVID, Delta, Omicron, there's been multiple strains of COVID. Most, like you know this, like most diseases will like mutate, especially as they're transmitting to multiple people, because mutations happen often during like infection or in a host. That's where like most of those mutations happen.
Sure.
Or in response to antibiotics or prescriptions or medicine, and also for vaccines. So we see how, like, for COVID, if I got a COVID vaccine, a year or two ago, and I didn't get my booster, right? And that's all I have is just that one vaccine from a little while ago. There's a chance I could still get COVID now because COVID looks very differently than it did a year or two ago. Sure. And so if I also had the same strain of COVID, a reintroduction of that or a reinfection is still possible. But this is also a thing with vaccines. If you have a vaccine and you get sick, it's not that the vaccine's only there to protect you from getting infection. Vaccinated people have lower symptoms. They recover quicker. They're less infectious. And so the disease is milder. And so that's a huge, empirically, it's a big difference. And so if you get reinfection, typically the same thing applies, where you have milder symptoms, less transmittable.
Sure.
Typically, and this is just typically, reinfection is not as serious. And so if you have a reinfection and you're vaccinated, that's where you get like really, really resilient people. And so we just see across the board, vaccinating helps lower the disease rate. It helps reduce transmission. It helps keep people out of the hospital, which is another giant aspect of this is that COVID has filled hospitals. So people that are like getting in emergency situations or need medical care or need elective surgeries can't get it. And so like that's a huge part of it too.
So what about like if the logic that, hey, if you're worried about the disease, just get vaccinated, you'll be fine. Why should other people have to get vaccinated?
Yeah. So the idea of personal safety versus community safety is a very, very vaccine-specific idea. And so for most things in life, it is about personal safety. Lock your doors at night. Keep your seatbelt on. Make sure to take the proper amount of your prescription. Yeah. Almost nothing in life in terms of safety is going to impact someone else's health. That's just like the overall like kind of conception of safety. For vaccines, though, the reasons vaccines are so effective is this idea called herd immunity.
Right.
And a lot of people like hear this term a lot, but it's not usually explained very well. And in reality, it's a very, very, very simple concept. If you take 5 people in a room and 4 of them are vaccinated, the likelihood that you throw disease in the room and it gets passed around to everyone is just less likely because 4 people are resilient out of 5. So the one person who is prone to that disease, who has no resilience to it, no vaccine, no protection, it's kind of like the idea of knocking down multiple walls, right, to get to one dude. Like I've seen examples of like if you took one dude in the center of a circle and surrounded him with multiple rings of people, the disease has to pass through more people who are resilient, have their armor up, have their vaccine, before it gets to the vulnerable community. So if I get vaccinated, I am putting up those walls for the people behind me. Right. And I am stopping the disease in its tracks if I ever come across it. So I bartend. If I wasn't vaccinated, 1,000% I would have gotten COVID. 1,000%, like just with the amount of people I'm interacting with. And my roommates had COVID at one point. I didn't get it. Right. I'm double vaccinated. I've had COVID. And so like I am very resilient. And so the thing is that in itself of just being vaccinated, right, has probably reduced like the situation, like has taken away the likelihood that I get someone else sick because I'm just not sick. Less sick people makes less sick people.
But that someone else that you would be getting sick is somebody that just chooses not to be vaccinated. Right. And isn't that their choice?
It is, but I think a big part of it is that like we're functioning from the perspective that the person who gets sick chose not to be vaccinated rather than someone who can't make that choice. So if someone has cancer,
that's a fair point.
If someone has cancer and they cannot get a vaccine, they just don't have the choice because their immune system is too weak to get vaccinated. Right. It would be super unfair and very anti-human to tell that person that they can't go out and enjoy the world. Right. And they can't go out and see their family, go out to eat, do things they want to do. And like, just because they have cancer and like they're on immunosuppressants, you making the choice not to get vaccinated is putting that person at risk of having a choice.
But if you can see the future,
right,
and you see that you're the one that gets the fever and dies from the vaccine, aren't you basically choosing your life over theirs,
I think that our idea of like that specific thing, right? You're just as likely to have that happen from like Advil or like any medicine. Absolutely.
But it's your choice to take. Nobody's forcing you to take Advil.
It totally is. I think the difference though is that if someone said, "Hey, listen, man, you take this Advil, and there is like a 0.0001% chance you die from it, right? There is like maybe a 0.5 or even a 1% chance you save someone's life with it. Yeah. I think that just the math there of like, oh my God, like I am 1000% more likely to save someone's life with this than to suffer. The the empirical evidence shows that vaccines are so much, and so I think be it a selfish choice, be it a gross, very like hurtful choice, it's still someone's choice to make whether or not to get vaccinated, right? But I think it's also fair those consequences still apply. Of like you can't go to a college and put other people at risk. You can't go to public school, put your kids in public school if you're going to put those people at risk. And I think if we just educate people and we have those barriers up, we only need about 90% of people to be vaccinated. We only need 10%. 10% of people
Yeah.
can be. You know how big the anti-vax community is? Like 3%.
Yeah.
3% of people are anti-vax.
Yeah.
We need 90% to be vaccinated.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
there's still like a huge margin.
Yeah.
The thing is, most people are.
I heard
hesitant.
80%, but I mean.
Well, it depends on the vaccine.
Yeah.
So some vaccines it's 90, sometimes it's 80. It just
Yeah.
depends. But it's usually around 90 for like a very, very solid.
Do you
herd
think
immunity.
like Pfizer just bumped it up to 90 so they can sell?
Yeah,
more
you sell more.
vaccines?
Right.
So
right.
that goes into one of my questions though. Okay. What do you think about the ethics of the pharmaceutical company? I mean, obviously they're
Right.
looking at shareholders, profits. I mean, this is definitely. I'm going to go ahead and say definitely, even with my scientific,
Yeah.
I'm going to say it's definitely a factor. I mean, they even admit that, they have to please the shareholders and whatnot. I mean, this exponential growth thing that American capitalism is on is just, I mean, it's a juggernaut that, like, I mean, how do you feel? What do you got? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question to like look at the pharmaceutical community around like the corporate element of vaccines, and I'd say one.
Because they have been caught doing shady shit.
Yeah, and that's what I was gonna say. With one, the anti-vax community is so critical of vaccines because of the corporate element.
Yeah.
And the argument of we can't trust corporations. They promoted lobotomy, racist studies like Tuskegee. These are the same people you're trusting to put things
Right.
in your body. And it's like, okay, slow down. I get what you're saying. Don't trust them. 1,000% agree that like we shouldn't just put like truth on authority that the pharmaceutical company, they know what they're doing. They have the best research in the world. They have all the money in the world. They have our best interest at heart. Fuck no, they don't.
Right.
Like if they sold a vaccine that didn't work and they could make more money and they wouldn't get caught, they would do it.
Sure.
The thing is though, we have to circle back around to the actual evidence and the studies and the empirical data.
Well,
And
in
so
the beginning,
that's-
though, the studies weren't there, though.
but that's the thing is that like vaccines have a very exploitative like origin story.
Yeah.
I mean, back in like the 1400s, the first case of like immunizing someone or giving someone the ability to be resistant to a disease was this guy who was like this doctor, and he was looking at like cowpox or something like that. And there was this, he took a scab off someone that had cowpox and took this like homeless kid and was like, here's a penny, eat this scab. The kid ate it and got super sick.
Yeah.
And then when he brought this kid and exposed him to cowpox, he didn't get sick. And he was like, wow, like I immunized this poor homeless child who didn't know what I was doing, and I underpaid him, and now I uncovered the research of immunology. That's how I started.
Yeah.
And so it's like, and you look at like the history of a lot of the research around even vaccines and around like a lot of the research of disease and infection. A lot of it is really, really, really immoral. But in the modern day, with most of the modern vetting we have, and most of like the foundations and like the kind of peer review and systems of like checks and balances almost we have in medicine, that the room for that exploitation is constricted. Because there's so many eyes on things. You need to have things peer reviewed by multiple sources and replicated to have it even be published. And so we can just have a lot more like strict guides on how things become data. And for the pharmaceutical side of things, yes, they still make money, but they need to prove it works first.
Well, therein lies the problem.
Yes,
because they do their own studies.
Yes.
And that information is not available.
But the definition of peer reviewed is going to be by people from other organizations.
But it's not, though. The data, they actually made an agreement under Trump. If I am no scholar, journalist, or
sure,
whatever. But I tried to look for it, like in the study, so it was agreed to get this vaccine out. Trump was like, "You got to get this thing out."
Oh yeah, yeah. Project Warp Speed.
Yeah,
whatever it was,
and basically, from what I understand, please write in the comments below. That's like the second time I ever said that.
yeah. I got you.
I don't want to be that guy. But the agreement was they do their studies, and they're allowed to. They don't have to release the data.
Yeah. So your question is COVID specific.
COVID specific.
Yeah. So
yeah. Like I said, we premise this whole thing that vaccine's good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So this is the really hard part around like looking at immunology and looking at like research and studies is that, and this is also a thing a lot of people have criticized the COVID vaccine for, is that the long haul symptoms or the long haul like long term effects of any medicine is like 5-10 years. right? At least, if not longer.
We're not there yet.
We aren't even 3 years into the pandemic, right? So I think a big part of like people's concerns of like, is this vaccine rushed? I think that's probably what kind of your question is geared towards, is 100% like fair, right? And I've even had that thought of like, man, it is kind of scary to like be someone who like is taking this medicine that is so new and having a vaccine that is so, in the terms of even just other vaccines, kind of understudied.
Yeah.
But a huge but to this is that like 700,000 people have died. Like a lot of people have died. Yeah. And so
worldwide.
In America, at least. I mean, we've seen like hundreds of thousands. Like,
I don't know the specific numbers.
It's shit. I mean, like if we just pull up like the current like.
Oh, I know it's a lot of people.
It's like a lot
for sure.
But I think that like we're talking about the concerns over and we've had looking at almost.
You know, I just keep thinking about how this video is going to get flagged.
Yes, I understand. So United States COVID deaths are at 1 million. It looks like. Correctly. Yeah, last updated. So, I mean, it's so bad, and we're talking about like your fears of the vaccine.
Right.
And is this rushed? Is it going to hurt me? COVID will hurt you or someone you love. That is almost like guaranteed. And like that is the thing that like risk assessment. Humans are bad at risk assessment. We're just naturally like we overestimate our ability and our willpower and our resilience to things. We underestimate the danger of things we see. It's just naturally humans do that. Yeah. But like with COVID, it is by definition one of the most dangerous diseases in the human history, in just the world, in the modern world. We had more people die from COVID in one day than 9/11.
Yeah.
And like the most amount of people who died in one day in America was from COVID. Sure. And so we look at like how many people died, and we go, but this vaccine, way different. Like this medicine is not going to be a worldwide pandemic, and like this medicine is going to save more lives than it cost. So that's where I, as a person, I'm like, I am willing to accept this risk because it definitely helps remove like the risk of COVID. It reduces the risk of COVID. Right. It makes me more resilient to it. It saves other people's lives. And I'm a little concerned about it, but people are taking very proactive efforts to continue the research side of things, and to make safer vaccines for the future. Sure. We're in a place of desperation. Yeah, probably in 20 years, we're going to have a lot safer COVID vaccine. Sure. Right? That's definitely going to be true.
The same way they used to do lobotomies, right?
Yeah, exactly.
No, but like, you know, so, yeah, I get into this thing. I get into this thing. No, but so, you know, what would you say to somebody that says, you know, I guess what I'm trying to say is, there's no doubt people will doubt COVID's a real thing for sure, you know, but in my eyes, there's no doubt that it's a real thing. I believe you. A lot of people have died, but I don't think that directly correlates to the vaccine being effective.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's like, are they just trying to sell more vaccines, or does it actually work? I mean, there's really no way to tell, because we'd have to split the Marvel timeline, and you know what I mean, have one where it went one way and one went the other way, so we can see both how it will go.
There's also, when we're talking about, so we talked a little bit about safety, and the idea of like, is this vaccine safe? It came out really quickly, and the answer to that was like, okay, well, COVID's definitely unsafe. The vaccine's safer, so maybe in like the long term we'll have a safer vaccines, but for now it's the best vaccine we have.
Right.
Effectiveness, and that's the other side of things. It's if the vaccine's effective and safe. Effectiveness for the COVID vaccine is definitely like a proven, statistically, empirically, a effective vaccine for COVID specifically, through the way we can look at small communities around school demographics and small zip codes of like schools that have lower vaccine rates versus higher vaccine rate. The higher vaccinated school systems have lower transmissions of COVID. On a larger national level and state level, the states that vaccinate more have less COVID rates. We also saw that COVID rates nationally went down dramatically.
Does that apply to Florida, though? Because I've seen that.
Yeah.
But it is a warm state, and there's a lot of sun, and sun kills. You know what I mean?
So there's also the idea that like diseases, and naturally with infectious disease, they go up and down in terms of transmission, and you know, a lot of people get sick at one point, and a lot of people don't. Also, a lot of people get COVID when people travel more. We saw like the highest rate of COVID transmissions was during holidays.
Yeah.
So like a lot of it, you can't just across the board say, oh, this is how many COVID rate. It's always the same. It always goes up and down. It fluctuates all the time.
Right.
But overall, when the vaccine was introduced, rates went down dramatically, and what we expected from fluctuations was lower. That's the big thing.
Right.
And so, the effectiveness of a vaccine is proven through the way the data changes. But also we're seeing that just anecdotally, a lot of people who are vaccinated are not getting sick. And also hospitals have been dramatically relieved their tension because COVID has not been as like oppressive to hospitals since the vaccine came out.
Yeah.
That's a huge thing is like is not just people getting sick, but it's also like how damaging their symptoms are. When the vaccine came out, less people were in the hospital with COVID. That's
right.
Across the board, dramatic difference.
Well, and if we anecdotally, and this is what I would always say, it's like I see, well, within the past, well, it was at a specific time, maybe a year ago, whatever,
right.
Within whatever, but anecdotally speaking, the only people I saw getting COVID were the ones that had the vaccine.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Which,
but I know,
I'm gonna give you an interesting thought.
Yeah.
Is there a chance that people get vaccinated and then they start taking on unnecessary risk? That's a big part of it. Think about how many people get a vaccine and think it's a free pass to whoever the fuck they want, and they're going to massive concerts.
But why get the vaccine if it's not a free pass?
Well, that's also I think that's illogical to have this idea that the vaccine will 100% protect me or it does nothing.
Yeah,
I think the vaccine can be an added element to protection, but it's not a golden ticket like Willy Wonka. So a lot of people treat it like that though, where they go, "Oh, I got vaccinated. I'm gonna rush into like every bar, every concert." I got COVID? That's crazy. There's still the idea of like disease exposure.
Right.
If you're wearing a PPE suit and you're also vaccinated and you're only going out once a month, you're not going to get sick, period. Right. But if you have a vaccine and you're just rushing out to every crowd event, you might get sick.
So that was another thing me and a friend of mine were talking about. It was like, there was a concert we wanted to go to, and at the time we weren't vaccinated, and I ended up getting mine, but because I had COVID, and I know natural immunity is a thing. I mean,
oh yeah,
it's definitely a thing. Well, there was a time they were saying it wasn't.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So that's when I started questioning. I was like, come on, no, it's a thing.
Yeah.
But when you had this concert, it was like, well, I thought if they were really concerned about the spread of COVID, they should have had everyone get tested.
Yeah.
But no, you just had to have a vaccine. And I'm like, well, no, you could still spread it. Like, what's the point? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So, like, it's just like people are making these rules that really make no sense to me.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, even this is, and I love citing the CDC. I love, like, looking at research and statistics and data. But, like, the corporate element has dramatically, like, just change our perspective on what the proper like restriction should be and the proper safety procedure should be. Like the CDC changed their guidelines to be like, oh, if you had COVID after 5 days or if you're asymptomatic, you're fine.
Yeah.
Which is like, okay, 1, asymptomatic carriers are a thing. 2, 5 days. Why is it 5 days now when it's like been 2 weeks for like a while?
Right.
And 3, on top of that, like it's a negative test or you're asymptomatic, so you're saying that if someone's been exposed, they don't really even need to test so they feel fine.
Right.
It's just up to user discretion. And so the only reason they did that though was because people weren't working and they needed people to go back to work or the economy was going to like collapse.
Oh, it's the same thing with the mask thing.
Yeah.
Wear masks, don't wear masks.
Right.
Because they didn't have masks.
A lot of concerts, especially like entertainment industries, restaurants, like stuff like that, right? They've suffered a lot economically.
Yeah. And
so less restrictions mean more revenue, means more people, it means more people going out. And so the restrictions have been limited and it makes no sense. And if their priority was safety, it would be get a negative test, wear a mask, make sure you're vaccinated, like all the proper layers.
Yeah.
Social distance, all of that.
Right.
But that's not the priority. The priority is revenue. The priority is getting people outside and going out
in America,
money.
man. Come on.
Yeah, exactly. and so this is the thing for like me and my friends. We wear our mask if we're going out to like bigger events if we can, but it's also like if we are like together, we trust each other to be like very conscious about our safety, not just go out all the time and like go to big parties. We don't like party. We're not like a party friend group. And I tell my friends like, listen, I work at a bar, and like it is not like I don't wear a mask at work because I'm talking to people all the time, and I'm like seeing people every day, to where like at a certain point in time, like for me, it also it impacts my revenue. It's like people won't see my face. Like I'm losing a huge interpersonal connection I make as a bartender, and it's like here's what I'll do. I will test, like if I feel unsafe, I will make sure that like I am being very proactive about if like someone has COVID, I'm not going to work, so I'm making sure other people are being safe. And like for me and my insurance, I take a test like once a month just to make sure like out of the blue I'm okay. And when my family, I had a friend who was kind of feeling icky, and I was like, take a test right now. Like, I'm not playing around with this.
Do you think you're just going to do that for the rest of your life, or what?
I mean, not really. I mean, I'm vaccinated, double vaccinated, and like I also had COVID back in December, because my unvaccinated sister got it. So it was like, there you go. But for me, like I'm in a place where I have the natural antibodies, I have the vaccine, I'm pretty careful about my safety, and I also don't have a huge robust social life outside of work. And if I ever feel sick, I take a test. Yeah. Like if I'm not prime shape, I'm taking a test. Yeah. And I think just in the world we live in, I think that's responsible upon myself to do that. Sure. And if I'm ever like feeling unsure, I just wear a mask. Or if I'm going out to a big thing, I wear a mask. I went to a Tyler the Creator concert back in like 2 or 3 months ago. I wore a mask because like I just was like, there's a lot of people here. I can't trust all of them. Yeah. So it's like I think that to me is like the more proper level of safety, where you're balancing your social life. You're being a little careful. You might feel sick. Take a test. Don't just like ignore it. Right. A lot of people don't care. Right. And that's where like you have vaccinated people who don't give a shit getting sick.
I don't know if it's that they don't care, like, because I have a tendency to, I'm with you. Yeah, I think where we kind of part a little bit is I think it should be a choice. I don't think the government should step in at all. Well, I mean, they should make it available. You know what I mean? Sure. Readily available and free, and we pay taxes. Well, shit, we should get healthcare or whatever. Anyway, but I think that it should be readily available. This came up before. You said education, but if we're going to educate people, I think that's going to solve every problem. Oh yeah, you know what I mean. I think it's just people just not being educated. It's like I talk to some people, and I don't even want to argue with them because I'd have to give them a whole course in biology or something, or physics or something. And it's like. I'm not a teacher. I don't. They're going to have to take it upon themselves. There's no way you can get through to some people. Yeah.
And some people, like my sister is 17, and she she's really closely connected to my mom. And we were talking about vaccines. She didn't even know like what the adaptive immune system was. And she says she's anti-vax, and she's very like anti-vax, and she kind of regurgitates a lot of the ideas my mom throws at her. Sure. And it was crazy because we were talking about it, and I was like, do you know what the adaptive immune system is? You know what antibodies are? Like, let's talk about this. I was explaining how vaccines use the same exact process your normal human body uses, which is like kill a disease, gather information from it, and then protect against it at a future date if it's reintroduced. I was like, the same exact system. It's just we give it a little tiny like trial to get that information it needs. She was like, wow, I didn't even know that. That makes so much sense. And it was just like, it was crazy because, I could have written her off as stupid. Right. But also she hadn't done the research. She just trusted, she said she trusted mom that she was right. That's where a big part of it is. Well,
and these are new. They're the mRNA vaccines.
Yeah.
So it's like a new tech. I hate to say technology when it's biology, but anyway,
it's new in the sense that it's like recently rolled out, but it's been researched for like the better part of like 20 years. Yeah. And like it's been something that like having your body produce the genetic information of the disease in your body rather than just like incorporating like a foreign thing. It honestly
works more with the mitochondria.
Yeah, well, because it's actually even safer because a big part of like the antibiotic, like the
dude, it's going to change your DNA and you're going to grow like pig ears.
No, it will not. It will not change. And like, and what's actually funny is that like there was a lot of people who were saying that the mRNA vaccine would impact your reproductive system. That was like a big piece of misinformation that went around.
And then
eugenics
thing.
Yeah, well, then actually a couple months later, there was some studies that showed that COVID caused lower fertility rates in men, and so it's like actually the opposite's true. Where like COVID actually impacts you more, and for the mRNA vaccine, it's safer because you're not introducing a foreign antigen, I think it's called. Yeah. Where it's like you're not introducing a foreign facilitator to cause that reaction. Right. it's doing it in your own body, and so you're not having as much of a reaction on like a fever or like an actual like kind of immune system level. On an immune level, you're not responding as much to it, and you get the same defense. Even some studies have proven that mRNA is like actually stronger.
Yeah.
So this is in some ways like a safer technology than other vaccines. Oral vaccines are actually the most unsafe, and that's the most outdated technology. We only use that for polio vaccines in remote places in Africa.
Right.
So technology is kind of crazy. We've gotten safer vaccines over the next couple years.
Yeah, and I guess it's like the chicken and the egg thing too, because it's like the pharmaceutical companies are very powerful, but are they powerful because they're greedy, or is it because the shit works? You know what I mean? And
well, I think it's both.
Yeah,
I mean, you look at the way that like painkillers work, but it's like they also like we're overprescribing painkillers and causing the opioid epidemic, and very intentionally. And so there's like the element that medicine is so great. Medicine is amazing.
Yeah.
Like having the ability to take something to cure your symptoms or your disease is one of the biggest innovations in human history.
Absolutely.
But the thing is, though, those things can be abused. They can be misprescribed. They can be overdone. They can be given when they're not appropriate. And so, like, I think you'll find this interesting.
And the commercial.
Yeah, it's commercial aspect. Yeah,
yeah.
the commodicism of it, the capitalism of it. I'm someone who's like the Surgeon General said that I'm one of the most important vaccine advocates in the world, and I'm one of America's most important vaccine advocates. Vaccines are one of the cornerstones of medicine.
It's going to be you and Greta.
Exactly. Greta was in Time magazine with me, so it's
really?
yeah. So
nice.
so the thing is for me is that I'm one of the most like, at least I was for like many years. I've kind of just stepped away from it just to live my life and like just honestly like it was just a lot.
Sure.
But like. For me, I'm someone who tries to avoid taking medicine if I can.
Yeah.
I don't take Advil. I don't take like Gas X or like Tums. Like I try and eat very healthy. I try and let my body like run its course.
Yeah.
But if I feel like an issue is important enough to go to a doctor, I will take their word for it like every time, and I will talk to them and like understand what they're talking about. And I will ask them a lot of questions. But if it's something that like it's clearly just we're just giving you this because we can, I don't take it. I had my wisdom teeth removed, and they were like, "Here's like some like Percocet or something," and I was like, "No, I will be fine."
Yeah,
I didn't take it. It's
man, I'll tell you what, I had a bad toothache. I took whatever they were going to give
That's
me.
Fair. That's fair, and I don't blame you for it. But like for me, it's like I actually sympathize a lot with people who are very like critical and skeptical of medicine and the pharmaceutical company. Like I'm like that.
I would argue you didn't really have a bad toothache.
Yeah, it's like, well, no, I was suffering for it. I had two wisdom teeth removed, and I was like in pain.
That's different than a toothache, like a bad tooth.
Oh, like in there?
Yeah.
Sure.
My God, it's in your face, and you just want to like take a jackhammer and just.
What? No, I get. I am so like anal about my health with like dental and like everything, and like I just try and let my body take care of itself if I can let it.
Yeah, and it will if you keep yourself healthy.
It will, for sure, but vaccines are one of those things that, like, it's just...
Well, that's one of the things Joe Rogan got in trouble about, was he was saying, if you just stay healthy, why is nobody talking about obesity? Like, why is nobody saying, hey, everyone should just be more healthy, because this thing's not going to kill you if you're healthy.
Well, I think that the idea of shifting the goalpost is a huge part of that.
Okay.
Where it's like... And that idea is like literally just moving the goalpost to where we kick the sucker in. It's like somewhere. But
seriously, though, it is a good point. Though nobody ever talks about like being healthy, eating right.
Yeah.
Like I even go to my doctor. He never tells me, "Hey, maybe you should eat better," or this and that, whatever. I mean, I get good numbers and stuff, but you know what I mean. Like,
well, I think that like if we're talking about the priorities of medicine, there's two things to consider. There's one, what is the quickest, most like easy to solve problem, and two. What is something that like is so far gone that like talking to this person is going to like hurt their health and like you need to fix it, or it's like I get a recommendation. A lot of people are like I think it's like 50% of people in America are obese, quote unquote. If we're going by BMI standards, you can be obese and be super healthy because you have a lot of muscle.
Well, I was taking steroids a few months ago, which I think is what causes. I've got this little leg problem here, but and directly prednisone, I guess, is something that causes it. But it also made me put on 25 pounds. And 25 pounds, I looked it up, BMI, I'm obese now.
Right.
I'm like, holy crap, nobody told me I was obese.
Yeah, exactly. But it's like the BMI scale is only looking at weight versus height and, like, not your actual muscle index. And so, like, your muscle weight is denser.
Right.
And so there's an element of, like, health that if you go into a doctor and you are a little overweight, but don't have a great diet, and you also don't vaccinate.
Yeah.
The doctor's going to look at you and probably be like, hey, you need to get vaccinated. That's what they're going to talk about. because that's a solution you go to the pharmacy and you solve that day.
Right.
Getting your health back in order, losing weight, is a much more long-term project that for a lot of people, if it's only within like 10, 20, 30 pounds, yeah, it's unhealthy, but it's like not going to hurt you overall like long-term bad. And
it's
so,
very valid.
Yeah, like, I think that most medical professionals are functioning from the place of like, this is a very easy, solutionable like thing we can address for vaccines specifically. And it's like also the results of this directly impact someone else's health versus like if I'm obese, the only person hurting is me. Right. That's a big part of it too.
And that's the thing. I guess it is a little short-sighted when, he's kind of saying, but it's true though. Yeah, sure. Yeah, get healthy. But how easy, like if you're a 40-year-old person, 30, I'm going to say 25-year-old person, and you've lived, you're in the habit of just eating poor, you're probably 100 pounds overweight, whatever.
Right.
What are the chances that you're going to change your lifestyle to solve the COVID problem?
Well, yeah, it's also like being in a fit, like healthy body is a very privileged thing. That requires you to have the mental and emotional state to like commit and be dedicated to working. It means you have the genetics that like help you naturally do that. It means you have the money to probably have a healthier diet because it's more expensive. Yeah. You have the time to like spend your time like dedicating towards that and focusing on that.
Yeah.
A lot of poor people who are overworked and don't have the money or time to like dedicate their life towards something different probably fall into habits that are unhealthy because they just don't have like the room to juggle.
It's so much cheaper to eat garbage.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that like
it's a systemic problem.
It's super unfair for people to be like, oh, we need to like focus on overall health. There's fat people everywhere when we're talking about vaccines, and it's like, okay, one, like huge difference in terms of how it impacts other people. Two, like way more factors play into like someone being healthy,
right,
and a fitness level. And three, like for a doctor's office and for like medical professionals, it's easier to address those problems for you to get vaccinated. It's like a quicker solutionable thing, and so. Like, for me, it's like a younger, like, 21-year-old, I'm very healthy. But, like, circa me 30, 40 years from now, I might be fat because I'm going to be older. It's going to be harder for me to do that stuff, And, like, if I wasn't lucky with the job I have and I was working for, like a minimum wage, like a menial labor job, 50 hours a week, I wouldn't have the time to go to the gym.
Right.
And, like, but I would have the time to run into Walmart and grab groceries and get my COVID vaccine while I'm there.
For free.
Exactly. Yeah, so, like, there's a huge difference in, like, the accessibility of that aspect that, like, I'd be healthier with my vaccine. It wouldn't take much time. It's not hard to do. You don't have to dedicate a big part of your life, your money to it. And so, like, do it. Like, it's something that helps other people, too.
Right.
So the Joe Rogan aspect of, like, I don't know. I feel like
that's his... Well, that's a lot of the reason, a lot of the times, because I get frustrated with that guy, man. Me and my one buddy, you met him, I'm like, I don't know, man. I can't take this and that, what he said. Because he does have I do see him trying to acquire knowledge, though. You know what I mean? It's not like he's completely like a meathead like a lot of people would like to believe he is, But I think he, like I haven't really paid too much attention to him. Like he would have some scientists on like a few years ago that I really liked, and so whenever I see like Sean Carroll or somebody like that on there, I watch that.
He also had Dr. Peter Hotez, one of the leading immunology researchers in the world. Yeah, good friend of mine.
Oh really? Mm-hmm. Oh nice.
Yeah.
So I mean he's definitely, I think he's fighting the good fight, but. It's so easy, if you're like listening to him and you're into like martial arts and exercising and being fit and eating right, I don't know how well he eats, but he, whatever. But it's easy to go, fucking these lazy fucking fat fucks, whatever, fuck, But it's like, well, they're not gonna fucking be healthy overnight. It's easier to get a vaccine. But but to his credit though, he did say if you are in that demographic, you should get vaccinated.
Right.
He did say that.
Well, I think also like there's a big difference in like the idea that if you're at risk, get vaccinated, or you're someone who like would be impacted by COVID, get vaccinated. It's not my job to take care of your health. And it's like, okay, whoa, like, no, healthy people should still get vaccinated because we are the people probably active more, out more. Like, we still want to see our family and our friends and our grandparents. Like, why are we putting them at more risk? Because we're not going to get impacted by it. It's not our problem. That mentality is very, like, it's very American.
Right.
It's very, like, individualist. It's not very community-driven. And I think that a lot of people, the reaction to like, why am I making a choice for other people? I mean, they scoff at that, but it genuinely, it's a very human thing to do, to be like, hey, I need to protect my community.
Yeah.
And for me, like, genuinely, full circle, the whole reason I got vaccinated when I was 18 was because I was like, if I get sick because I'm unvaccinated and I get someone else sick and they get hurt, I will never be able to live with myself. Yeah. If I get measles and I give it to a 2-year-old who dies, how would I live with that? You know? Like, that would be my fault.
I would have been like, that damn 2-year-old should have got vaccinated. No, no, but they can't.
No, it's like,
but I said they should have got vaccinated. But
but if you're less than 1 year old, you can't get an MMR vaccine. Yeah. So like, it's also where most of the mortality rate is for MMR. Right. For measles. For measles, it's usually kids are less than 1.
Right.
And like I had a newborn sibling like just the year or two before then. So like I had a baby brother, and I was like, oh my god, like me.
Wait, your parents are still having kids, man?
My mom. She had. No, that's a whole thing. I have like 6 siblings.
Okay.
But no,
very Christian of you.
Yeah, very like. I almost feel like we're kind of in that like Mormon household, or like too many cooks kind of thing, where it's like there's a lot of people running around here. But like seeing that though, and like, I love my little baby brother, and like. If it's just looking at him and imagining that I could be responsible for something like that dying, being snuffed out, it's like
that'd be awful.
Terrible. And like, and so the idea of like, oh, I wouldn't get sick. It's not about me,
right?
Like, it's 100% that like I could cough on this baby and it would die. Holy shit! Like, that's scary.
So you said it's very American to be selfish. Well, I think I'm paraphrasing.
Individualist.
But, yeah. How do you think that's going to go?
What do you mean?
Well, you know, a lot of people say it's like, you know, the American, you know, it's kind of like a test run. You know, it's like an experiment.
Sure.
You know, it's basically the first time this kind of capitalism has ever kind of come to be. And, you know, there's that argument that's like Marxism is a response to capitalism, but you know, like some Marxists believe that you have to have capitalism to get to Marxism.
Yeah.
You know, I'm just wondering, where do you think that, you know, because, you know, American capitalism, I mean, I don't think too many people can disagree that it really is individualistic, like you said. You know what I mean? It's what can you do for me? It's about me.
Transactional.
It's, you know, I think community sounds too much like communism, so people don't even care about it, right? I mean, so I don't know. Do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean,
you brought it up.
There's a huge amount of differences on a sociological level in the way that like Eastern versus Western culture.
Yeah.
Look at talk about medicine, like medical autonomy in a lot of Eastern like society. In Eastern cultures, medical autonomy is like the family makes the decision for the sick person. In Western culture, that'd be super, super like taboo for like the family to say, oh, we're not going to tell this person about their cancer diagnosis.
Right.
Like, huge difference. But that's a very common thing in other like cultures. And like, look at the way that other cultures.
You're saying other cultures won't.
Yeah, like so for Eastern cultures, like for like, you know, Japan, Korea, like, you know, looking at like Vietnam, like a lot of these places like further east, this Eastern society, like their idea of the medical autonomy is more like the body of autonomy is the family. Right. So if there's someone who is sick and they get a cancer diagnosis, the doctor will tell the family, and then the family will decide if they tell the person. And that's
really,
it's like very common.
I did not know that. That's cool. Well, I don't know how cool it is, but it's interesting that I didn't know it.
It's very strange.
Yeah.
And so there's also huge differences in the way that like in other countries they have more social programs, or like in places like Mexico. The cultural identity of like Latin Mexican kind of like holidays. Look at like Dia de los Muertos or like quinceañeras, very family oriented. Mm-hmm. Look at like most religious cultures, like the Jewish community, very tribal, very like this is our family. This is like we're all together.
12 tribes, man.
Yeah, exactly. So we lose like I think American like the American exceptionalism of like we're this melting pot, everyone comes together. That may have been the original idea, but now it's turned into this capitalist, like, it is my family, my nuclear, like, lawn, house, like, I take care of mine, you take care of yours ideology that is very, like, unique to us. Very unique to us. Most humans don't live like that. And most humans live in a much more community-oriented concept, that it's not the individual who lives above the community, it's the community that lives together, and the individual is part of that.
Do you think that ideology kind of comes from the fact that whoever's in power feels as though, hey, I should be in power, nobody should tell me what to do or not do with my finances or whatever? Because I kind of say, like, if we're going to agree that we're going to be in a monetary system, it needs to be spread out, because whoever controls most of the money is going to have the power, because money is power. So it should be redistributed. But you say that, and it's such a dirty word in America.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, because I think that, like, there's this American conception of, like, the fruits of labor and, like, the idea of, like, your work, your money. It is, like, there's this idea of theft almost, that, like, even things like taxes are, like, being stolen from you.
Right.
And there's this huge concept of, like, I am working in society to better my life and my family, and everything externally is trying to pull that away from me.
Right.
And so we also have, like, this glorification of people in power, a glorification of, like, high power jobs, high income jobs. We see education as a means to get money. The number one question someone asks you when you tell them you're going to school for something is, oh, will you make a lot of money doing that?
Yeah.
Or, like, oh, I'm going to art school. How will you make money doing that?
Right.
Everything is so monetary driven,
Right.
and it's so, like, American. It's so unique to us.
Right.
And I think a lot of people also have this, like, really cruel cycle where we go, oh, like, I feel like my taxes are being stolen from me because, like, I have all this money being taken out of my paycheck every week, and then the government does fuck all for you.
Right.
So it's like you don't feel like your taxes are being taken in some worthy fashion.
Right.
And so it's like that just reinforces the idea that they're being stolen. If we had a system that benefited people, gave them what they needed, gave them, like, their means to survive, their healthcare, their food, their housing, or, like, their education, like the things that we need in life, if the government took care of that, we wouldn't be like, oh my God, my taxes, where are they going? Like,
right.
We'd be like, okay, good, like, I'm being taken care of.
Yeah.
And so we have this very, like, American idea that no one will take care of us if we don't take care of ourselves, because the government does fuck all for us.
Right.
And we elect politicians and leaders who do fuck all for us. We have, like, corporations that are constantly trying to exploit us. So the natural reaction is, well, I need to take care of myself.
Right.
I need to have a job that gives me my health care. I need to make enough money for my family to be taken care of, because no one else is going to do it.
Well, I guess is what I'm saying is that's a trickle down kind of ideology. It's like, well, these guys feel that way, so they're taking all the taxes. I mean, corporations get tax breaks while middle class gets more taxes. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And it's like, and really, where is that going? We don't have free healthcare.
Yep.
I still run into potholes on the road. Like, the infrastructure is awful in America.
Yeah.
I mean, compared to any other first world nation, so it's like, what are you really doing? Whereas if people actually saw something being done, if you had free healthcare, because dude, I've been to Europe, I've talked to people, there's people that are happy with the system they live in. The idea that, oh, we're free, I don't know, I've traveled all over the world and I see free people everywhere.
Yeah, exactly.
And
the only thing America leads in is military spending.
Well,
that's like one of the only.
And it's not even close.
No, not even close. That's like the thing that, like, America does better than everyone else, and the most dramatic, like, this is the most American thing we do.
Yeah.
It is the military, and
right.
Like, we spend billions and billions and billions and more. We spend more than the next 10 countries combined.
Yeah.
And it's like, of course, people are going to feel like this system, that the only thing that we do in excellence is military. Of course, people are going to be like, okay, well, fuck this. Like, I'm just going to fucking take care of my 2 kids and, like, try and get a good job, and, like, that's all I can do for my life. Like,
right.
I mean, yeah, it's in other European countries, they have freedoms. They have the ability. They have freedom of speech. Like,
it's like people that have never been anywhere feel like everyone else in the world is just locked in chains when they go home from work or something.
The biggest lie that I think everyone in America has consumed, like, the biggest, like, piece of bullshit, the biggest disinformation people have consumed, honestly, is the idea that patriotism is anything different than nationalism.
Oh,
like,
absolutely.
Anything different.
I've always used it synonymously. You know? I mean, for sure, it is.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, being a patriot to your country, being someone who looks at the flag and feels any kind of pride for it, and is like, oh, this is America. Right. And it's like, this is a random jumble of land that was separated from Pangea a billion years ago.
Right.
And we are doing fuck all with it. And we are like not giving people what they need. We're spending so much money in the military, and we're so far behind in education, so far behind in infant mortality rate, so far behind in every statistical thing that matters. Why are you like proud of this?
Right.
And like I think we can
I agree.
We can be happy and we can like be glad that we have certain freedoms. We can look at like the Constitution and be like proud of some things that were written, but it's like just because we have the Second Amendment with the freedom of speech doesn't make us like suddenly this like this equinox of freedom.
Right.
You know? And
well, when that was written, everyone didn't have freedom of speech anyway. It was only if you own land.
Who actually got it?
If you own land.
Yeah, if you're a white landowner, you had freedom of speech. Good for you. Like everyone else, like you had fucking slaves and women being like, "What about us?" And they're like, "No." So even then, it's like, not even like special. It's and I think this is like. If we're talking about like with talking about this conversation just largely centered around like vaccines and COVID and medicine, and then talking about like kind of this political landscape, that a lot of these larger ideas we've touched on are suffering from. So like the idea of dogmatism, the idea of like I'm right, I know I'm right, the idea of like just believing people based on authority. Nothing captures that more than capitalism. Yeah. Nothing does more, and like nothing does that better than politics. And some people get exhausted by it because everyone's just being dogmatic. Everyone's just being selfish. Everyone's just like praying to their side, like their poster of Reagan in the corner. And it's just like, and it's like, you're just everyone like zoom out.
Yeah,
we are a bunch of working class people who just work our asses off to get no money, and we have nothing. We have no health care. We have no benefits. We just work and work and work, and then we live in a society that culturally is so individualistic. We don't have a culture to like rally around. And we see a lot of like, I think Cleveland does this really well, where like Cleveland and like a lot of metropolitan urban places that are also more liberal have more of a community oriented like idea of like what life should look like. Yeah. Where you have like restaurants and museums and like parks and events that are meant to draw people together so they can celebrate and have fun and like do things beyond just 4th of July parades and like cookouts with their family. I think that's so like bare bones, and we see that like Cleveland and more metropolitan places do that a lot better, where like there's more to life than that. Yeah, like we can just celebrate being humans. We can celebrate being people and go out and mingle and have fun and just laugh and eat and just celebrate our lives together and do it in a way that like is just because we're people. Yeah. And I think that's something that America loses a lot of, because we have so many people who live in like rural, small town echo chambers that are just so like me and mine and my family and my lawn, don't tread on me kind of thing.
Yeah, and that being said, it's like, it's when people, I've always said people are, in general, are good.
Yes.
I think it was Socrates said that, oh man, no man willingly does like wrong, mm-hmm. and I believe that, and I believe, because I've worked in customer service long enough, it's like you work some places like, and people are like, oh, people must be awful, and it's like, yeah, because you remember the shitty ones more than you remember 90% of the good ones. You know what I mean? They leave more of an impression in your head. I always kind of use the analogy where it's like, teachers always remember the bad kids. I don't know, because, well, I did do some corporate teaching. And yeah, you remember the ones that give you a hard time, but you remember the really exceptionally good ones too. Right. But in the middle there are just generally good people, And I think the problem with this country is most people are good. And if you take away any of the propagation that we are either blue or red, if you take away that, most people will agree. I think most people agree a flat tax. Most people agree that, You know what I mean? You should take care of everyone, whatever. You know what I mean? It's just that there's this very small percentage of people that run everything. You know what I mean? And I think it's that mentality like, hey, I don't have to do this. It's like, the handful of like, billionaires that own everything. Like, well, why should I do this? And it's like that whole, and it's like propagated down, and it's like even to somebody that's like struggling with their bills, and they're like, well, they're sticking up for that rich guy. Well, he worked for it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And he deserves it. It's like because they feel like they can be there too.
They can be the guy, yeah.
You know?
The entitlement of, like, it's very ableist, I think, is a thing. If America is anything, it's very ableist, where it's like, I can be that person. I can achieve this. You can too if you work hard enough.
Right.
And I think the term ableism gets thrown around a lot, especially in the context of, like, people with, like, mental deficiencies or disabilities, people with physical disabilities. But, like, the idea of looking at someone with no legs and telling them to, like, run faster, that's ableism. That is 100% looking at someone and being like, I can do it, so you can too.
Right.
And I think that so much of our culture, especially work culture, especially money culture, capitalism, is propagated in this idea of, like, oh, pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
Right.
There are people out there who suffer from mental illnesses, people who suffer from, like, abusive upbringings or spouses, people that are being exploited in their job. And it's like any number of those things, even just one of them, can dramatically change the, like, course of your life. And to look at that person and say, sorry, dude, get fucked. Not fair. It's not how. It's not human.
In the wild, it works that way. Even like the weakest, gets kicked out of the nest.
It does.
And it's like, also it's like when you're thinking about population and whatever, it's like, well, should we just be completely Darwinism or what?
Well, very. I think that, like, the idea that we as humans have built society, we have built society for a reason.
Yeah.
The question is, what is that reason? Is it to go beyond just, like, Darwinistic survival and, like, have the ability to, like, enjoy life? Or is it just to have, like, survival of the fittest with a different coat of paint?
Yeah.
Where it's like, oh, you're just in the jungle trying to find the best job possible.
Right.
Fuck everyone else. It's you and your family against the world.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like that as a goal is just not as good as being like, we should have a life that's happy and where you can enjoy life and enjoy, like, the pleasures of being around people and pursue other things like education and joy.
I agree.
And like, it's a very surface level thought, but I think that, like, for most people, they just function from the place of, like, I went to college, got a 9-to-5, worked my 9-to-5, built a retirement, had kids, die. I did that. You should too. But the previous, like, generations have so much bottled up emotional damage, trauma, just absolutely, like, dismissed issues that they just work themselves to death to avoid.
Yeah.
And they expect the new generation to do that. And so my generation is being looked at as, like, lazy or, like, unwilling to work or not motivated.
Hey, my generation got that too, man.
Oh, every generation did. That's the thing, is every generation did. But, like, I'm hearing at least now.
Yeah, the guys growing up in the 70s too. They got the hippies, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then, like, their dad, like,
and then in the 50s it was the beatniks, you know.
Exactly. It's like I fought in World War I. Like, you don't know what hard work is, and it's like, okay,
yeah.
But the thing is that, like, it's just, it's so unempathetic to, like, look at the world and be like, work harder.
Yeah.
It's just not fair. It's just not fair.
Whereas that working harder does benefit you. You know what I mean? For sure. But yeah, it's demeaning. It's like you said. It's not very empathetic.
There's a time and place for, like, the self-help book that's like, get out of bed,
right?
Put in effort, and, like, motivating people.
Yeah.
If you can. For me, that's what I need. Like, for me, I am a healthy 21-year-old man who, like, has a good job, and, like, if I have an issue in my life, I am emotionally in a place where I can, like, tackle it. I have a girlfriend who's very supportive. Like, I have a lot of privileges in my life. Privileges.
Right.
Not things that I should expect from people.
Right.
Privileges are things that, like, you were lucky or someone gave you.
I've always said that too, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like,
I got lucky.
Exactly.
In a lot of ways. Yeah.
I think a lot of people, they don't see it as luck, they see it as hard work. And it's very it's very egotistical.
Right.
It removes, like, the control you have over that to be like, it was a privilege.
Sure.
And I'm gracious. I'm humble. If I worked hard, I did that. It's so egotistical.
You're talking about rolling a stone up the hill.
Exactly. Well, I mean, here's the thing, is that, like, for me, that's, like, what works in my life is the idea of, like, if I want to be healthier, I'm going to go to the gym. If I want to be healthier, I'm going to eat better. I'm going to very cause and effect, solution-oriented person.
Yeah.
But I have the capacity to do that.
Yeah.
One of my best friends struggles a lot with, like, being motivated and, like, being depressed. And we'll talk, and he'll be like, man, I wish I could harness, like, and tap into what you got here. And I'm like, dude, don't. That's not fair.
Yeah.
Don't do that to yourself, and don't do that to me. Because, like, I love you as you are, and if you need support, I'm willing to offer it. and give you the excess that I have because I have the privilege of having some excess to give.
I feel the same way. Yeah.
So I think that, and that's also how the larger community should work, where we band in together and say, hey, we're the 80% that can, so we'll help the 20% who struggle.
Yeah. I'm able to help you. I will.
Exactly.
You know.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't understand any other way of thinking, honestly. You know, but we were talking about, you know, it's like, what is humanity, whatever. And I think that's the difference is we are human. We know better. We're not in the wild.
Yeah.
It's a very progressive thought. I guess if you're conservative, you don't want to move in that direction, I guess. But, you know, it's like the same argument, you know, and I believe you should eat a lot of vegetables. You know, but you talk to vegans and they're like, the gorilla is the strongest animal. And I'm like, well, I'm not a gorilla.
Yeah, I'm not a gorilla.
You know,
I'm a dude.
Yeah, right. You know, our physiology is way different.
Right.
They obviously can process it differently to put it into muscle in some way, which humans cannot.
Yep.
It's the same way with empathy and helping each other out and working in community is like, you know, just help each other out, and it's because we're human that we have the ability. You know, why dismiss it? You know.
Yeah, and I think that like for me, and also this is actually what kind of caused me to pull away from my vaccine work because like my whole message in my vaccine platform was like be empathetic, have a conversation with people, like love people, understand people's fears, and like work with them. And vaccines are one of the things that like the 80% of people can band together and say we will protect the last 20%, which is awesome. I love that. And I was doing a lot of that work, and it became very corporate. It became very like, oh, Ethan, make a TikTok, make a YouTube channel, start a podcast, like make these things about you, right? And I was like, no, because it's not about me.
Yeah.
It's about like empathy. It's about helping people. It's about being a good person. And I will be a good person either on a platform and on a stage, like talking about vaccines, or like at Jukebox. Like bartending, because I've always been the same guy. I've always been someone who like loves people and tries to be understanding. Even when I was like involved in church, I was someone who like never would ascribe to like the more homophobic ideals because I was like, no, like these people are people. Right. So for me, I think that it comes down to like personality before your philosophy. It's like it's not that you're born a good person; it's that we can choose to be good people. And it's like I would make that choice every day to like be a good person, and that's like. I think that like for me where I find the most joy is like separating from those things that lie to me, separating myself from the technology, the corporate aspects, the capitalism, the advertisements, and just being like, you know what, I love people, I'm gonna be a good person and like be as educated as I can be as healthy as I can be, but like more than that, I'm gonna be someone who helps people, and like that is 100% what matters.
Yeah, I can't find anything to push back on there.
It's very like we're talking run of the mill like be a good person shit, but like I don't know, I feel like I've actualized myself pretty well as a 21-year-old, and like it's fun because like I enjoy being just like someone who can just talk to people and be kind.
Yeah, I wanted to we'll switch gears a little bit here. Well, so you had an opportunity to go on. What were you on? Fox News, CNN, MS, everything.
You can list any.
Yeah. Did you actually go there, or did you get to meet the people? Did you get an understanding? What was that like? Can you say if one was better than the other?
Can.
Yeah.
I can.
Okay. What do you think? Yeah.
So some of it was to like telecast, where I'd go to Cleveland and there'd be a broadcast station where I'd be like talking to Fox and Friends host on like a radio earpiece in front of a blank camera. Other times I'd be like in the actual newsroom. That was a very, very different experience. Sometimes it was like documentary crews. Yeah. So there's 3 different beasts there. For sure, like the best media company I worked with was Vice News.
Oh, okay.
So Vice News, I was part of a documentary series they put on Hulu, which you actually watch on Hulu.
Okay.
Like they have an episode like where I'm largely the protagonist of like that episode, which is pretty cool.
Nice.
And they followed me to like multiple conferences. Documentary host Krishna, he hosted Weedakit with Vice News, which was like a big weed center documentary thing we did. I was with him a couple times in the streets of Belgium and people recognized him. Yeah. Or like out in New York City and people pulled him aside and they're like, you hosted like the Weedakit thing.
Oh, wow.
So he's like a big, big journalist. Dude was one of the nicest people I've ever met.
Yeah.
Great journalist, like very good at asking questions, just listening. We got dinner a couple of times and just talked. Nice, good family man.
Yeah.
And the documentary style of filmmaking was very personal, where they were trying to learn my story and get like the real version of me.
Right.
So even in the Hulu documentary, they're like, Ethan's at this like conference talking to like all these people on like a drama reality show.
Yeah.
In reality, he's kind of a fucking nerd, and they showed me playing like a D&D campaign.
Oh yeah.
Which is like hilarious, and like it was a fun little stab, and like Krishna was like, "We want to. Who are you? Like, what do you do with your life?" And I was like, "I play D&D, I guess." And like they filmed me playing D&D. I played.
That's awesome.
And so that was really cool. It was very human. And Krishna was a good friend. Like we talked a lot as people, as humans. The worst of it.
Are you like an enemy against magic people, or?
Oh my god, I hate people who are like just. I hate people who are like just. They're not actual human beings. They're just talking teleprompters, and they're like, "This is the worst of it."
Well, I meant because you said D&D and magic. No, and Magic.
Oh yeah.
The Gathering or whatever.
Sure.
Yeah, but anyway, no, but good. I want to hear this.
But like the worst of it was, there's this show called The Doctor and the Diva. Already huge red flag. I had no fucking clue what this was.
Yeah.
And they reached out and they're like, "We're this big thing in like Jersey," and I was like, "Okay, Jersey, this sounds even better."
Yeah.
And they were like, "We want you to come out. We'll fly you out. We'll do this like interview with you with Doctor and the Diva." It's like this celebrity diva woman and this like actual doctor. They like talk about medical issues on like this reality show. I'm like, all right, that's an interesting premise.
Yeah.
And Krishna and the Vice documentary crew were like, they came to film that segment of the documentary, like of me, doing my whole advocacy work. Part of like what they were showing was me at this like conference, at this interview.
Right.
So they fly me to Jersey, and they do my makeup and all this stuff, and it's just like classic round mirror, huge lights, makeup all over me, and I'm like, oh my god,
yeah,
I fucking hate this. And I get out there, and I'm like backstage waiting to go on. They have a live studio audience, and I step on stage, and I sit down next to the host, and they're like, all right, guys, so we're gonna start in like 5 minutes. And this is what the two hosts did the entire time I was next to them. Just didn't even fucking look at me.
Yeah.
Didn't even look at me. And so they're like this, and they're like, all right, 10, 9, they put it away. And they're like, Ethan. And I was like, oh my god.
Didn't even look at you. Yeah.
It was just so gross. And they talked to me for like the 5-minute segment, and they stand up and walk away.
Wow.
And I was like, oh my god. And like the crew
just doing their job.
Oh my god, yeah. And the crew comes up to me like, that was great. And I was like, fuck you guys. So it's like, this is terrible. And it was just like the most gross, like, you're here, get out of here, like, and you're not even like, you're not a real person. You're just here for the
What
airtime.
channel was this?
It was The Doctor and the Diva.
That's right. What is that on?
I don't know. There's some show in Jersey, and like apparently it's a bigger deal, but like that's how it kind of felt around the Fox News circles. It's how it felt with definitely MSNBC a couple times. It was like that.
Yeah.
BBC was also really good. BBC was good.
Yeah.
Because they also had some good hosts, and like I was at their actual like headquarters in New York City, and they were really cool. There was one journalist. Who was it with? It was with oh man, I think it might have been CNN actually.
Yeah.
There was a CNN documentary like for like just television, like a television documentary. And the host, like, I go to their headquarters in New York City, and I go up there, and we sit down for like half an hour and start talking. And this fucking asshole, this woman, she starts like listing off like high-level medical questions, and she starts going like, "Who is Dr. So-and-so? Like, who is this guy? Who is this guy? Do you know what this is?" And I was like,
was she trying to get
a
gotcha kind of thing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was like, I instantly caught on because I study journalism.
Yeah.
I'm very I also read a lot about like media landscape and like debate, and I was like biting my lip, being like, oh my god. And I answered every question.
And this was CNN, you said?
I think it was CNN.
Yeah.
And I answered every question she had.
Yeah.
I was like, oh yeah, Doctor who we just talked about, the guy who's on Joe Rogan, Peter Hotez, Dr. Peter Hotez. Like Dr. Peter Hotez is the immunologist who wrote the book on like vaccines not cause Rachel's autism. He's one of the leading immunology researchers in the country. Yeah. Fuck you, like.
But you would think somebody like CNN would you're on their side, I guess.
No, but like
narrative.
Part of it's also I'm 18.
Yeah.
So it's like maybe like the angle they were hitting at was like, is this person smart, or like is he just this kid swept up in the show? And I don't know what they were gonna do with that if I had fumbled the bag, but like part of it was just to probably give them more to work with. Like if they did catch me with a gotcha thing, like maybe they could make a headline out of it and be like,
immunology vaccine advocate doesn't even know what an antigen is.
Right.
Like they could have definitely run with that, and that was that's the scary aspect of like news is that it's very like shark infested waters.
Absolutely.
There's also like Dr. Mike Vershovsky. He runs the YouTube channel Dr. Mike. It's like 7 or 8 million subscribers.
Wow.
I got to meet him in New York City, and he was like, I was a big fan of his. Super nice guy. I went on Fox Business actually, and on the Fox Business interview, Dr. Mike called in, and we were on the same interview together, side by side. We weren't in person; we were both on the same like segment, and talking next to each other, talking heads. And they started asking some really like curveball questions, and Dr. Mike was like, "I'll take this one for Ethan," and he stepped in, which was really cool. And later he texted me and he was like, "Hey man, just so you know, like that happens sometimes. If you ever feel like the news media is kind of like throwing you a curveball, always try and like shift the conversation or shift the question to something you're more comfortable with, because they will try and put you in a corner." Yeah. And so I actually had some people kind of coaching me, which was really, really nice.
Okay.
It was really cool. But there were some were bad. Like, and it wasn't just the left or right media. It was very much like it's all the same conglomerate business of just trying to sell shit.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's like the only people that are fighting over left and right are the people that are sold it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Pelosi and McConnell are probably best friends. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And it's like I also saw a lot of like on the political level. I was involved in medicine, so like the Surgeon General Jerome Adams, super nice guy, like 20th Surgeon General. He went into Trump's administration as Surgeon General because of his work under Mike Pence. Okay. So he was like, when Mike Pence was governor, Jerome Adams was like the commissioner of health, or like the health director for the state. And so when Mike Pence was brought up to VP, he brought Jerome with him from the state health panel. And Jerome was like someone, when he was working with Mike Pence, he would like actually go against Mike Pence's wishes to talk about different things like the AIDS epidemic. Yeah. So Mike Pence got like letters from people in his state being like, hey, like my kid's going to school being educated about AIDS stuff. I don't like that. So Mike Pence was like, hey guys, don't talk about AIDS. Elected decision from the governor. And so Jerome Adams, being a health commissioner, was like, oh, okay. Goes to a health conference. He looks Mike Pence dead in the eyes and he's like, so the AIDS epidemic, and would just talk about it. Like, did not care. Yeah. And so they had like a bit of a rivalry, but for some reason Pence still brought him into like the position of authority of Surgeon General because he was just so qualified and so like good at his job. But Jerome had to actively like push against the politics of it. Sure. And we talked a little bit about that, where I was like, hey Jerome, like nudge like, I heard you're not like the biggest Trump guy. And he was just like, I see what you're doing. Yeah. You know how I feel. I'm not talking about it. And I was like, you're smart. And he even told me, he was like, listen, Ethan, for your vaccine work, don't get involved in politics. Yeah. Like, keep it to vaccines, because people will eat you alive if you like let them like pull you into other directions. Yeah. And so he played the political game very well, but he also was someone who like wasn't interested in just like shaking hands. Yeah. Very rarely you find that, very rarely. Yeah. So I met a dude like that though, that wasn't just the Nancy Pelosi shaking hands like, what's up, we're best buddies, like we're supposed to hate each other kind of thing. Like like Jerome was like, he was a great example of a genuine dude, and like the reason was he started as a fucking anesthesiologist or like a surgeon, like the dude was an actual doctor, and then he became a politician. Like, yeah.
Were there any So was it mostly like a live thing, or did you feel like somebody kind of edited, something to make it seem a little disingenuous? I don't know.
Ooh, yeah. Good question. A lot of it was live because it was like news. Yeah. Some of it was edited because it was like documentary work. There was a British documentary. Mm-hmm. Actually, I was a part of a lot of global documentaries too. Okay. I've probably done like 8 or 9 documentaries. Wow. Where like I was like one of the main subjects of them, not just like just a witness testimony, like 8 or 9 teams like following me to multiple conferences, like communicating a lot of back and forth. Yeah. One of the documentaries I was part of, they went with me to New York City back in like February of last year. So still like pandemic time. I had to get tested and wear a mask and be very careful because the vaccine wasn't on full rollout yet. But part of the scene they wanted to shoot was like me with my friends that live in New York. So I have a group of friends that live in New York City, live in Brooklyn. And they're like, oh, we want to film you as eating dinner or talking about your vaccine work. But this segment, it follows the part where we talk about how people made like death threats against you. People were like being very harassing you online. So we want someone at one point in the conversation, someone to say like, just be careful, Ethan. Like sometimes we worry about you. And all my friends were like, we're not going to say that. Like we know Ethan's safe. We know that he's smart. Like we don't want to like fearmonger.
Victimizing.
Yeah, we don't want to victimize and fearmonger that. Like it's scary, but like we know he's okay.
Yeah.
And they were like, the journalists were like very firmly pressing them like, no, we need this for the transition of the scene. And it was like their vision of what they wanted. And so like in the conversation, my friend like Emma, she was just like, just be careful. And they took that and used it, and it was like, oh my god, like they had a very, very clear intention what they wanted, and they edited that into like the piece.
Right.
Even though they felt like, all my friends even told me afterwards, they were like, that was a little like scripted.
Right.
And it felt really weird. So it's I've had that happen in smaller or bigger ways where it's like, we need this, so do it. And it's like, why? Like, I'm not your show monkey. I'm not gonna sit out like put on like a suit and just dance around for you.
Right. Yeah, they just want to put out the narrative that they want, and they chose you because they felt like something was there that they could cherry pick.
And there's a difference between that and like probing.
Yeah.
So and I think that there's a fine line of like the journalistic integrity of like, okay, we want this from the piece. Clearly, we're here for a reason to talk to this guy.
Yeah.
But also like we need to respect that this is a real person. But we also want genuine answers that maybe they're not willing to give right away. And so like even this is why I said Krishna was a great one, because Krishna from Vice News, there's a couple times we were talking and he'd be like, so why are you doing this? I'd be like, oh, like political like answer, like I'm doing it because of vaccines. And they'd be like, okay, well what's the real reason, Ethan? Like fucking like I'll turn the cameras off right now.
Yeah.
But like why are you actually doing this? And I was like, damn. Like that's kind of tough because like now you're asking me as a real person like what I think.
Yeah.
Not just like teleprompter, like asking the questions and I have an answer and I'm like, I give right after that.
Right.
So, and that was kind of cool. Like though that's a very different thing than like, this is what we want. This is what we need for the scene. This is like, say this, do this. Oh, we might edit it out. We might edit this out. We might clip this in versus like, hey man, like real talk. Why are you doing this? And it's like, okay, I'm willing to be more honest with that actually and give you kind of what I know you want.
Yeah.
If you just ask me.
Sure.
Yeah. It's kind of wild.
I just ask because when you see this and it's like you're pro-Christian, anti-vax.
Yep.
I'm going to edit it in a way that you're going to be just...
Dude, so you said you did watch my TED Talk?
Yeah.
I had a buddy who edited my TED Talk, and it was like, "Hi, I'm Ethan Lindenberger, and I'm Hitler," and then like, and then it ends, and everyone's clapping, and it's like, and he's like, "I'm a journalist, baby," and like, because at one point I said that like anti-vaxxers said I was like basically Hitler because I was vaccinating kids and I was promoting vaccines, and Hitler killed a bunch of people. I'm killing a bunch of people, but he just edited it up. It was so good. It was so good. It was really funny.
All right, so Well, I had to turn the air conditioner off because I didn't want the sound. So it's getting a little hot in here. But I think we've touched on a lot of things. The only thing that I kind of want to know is where you're going now, man. So you're going to you're doing the journalism thing. Where do you see where do you see yourself?
Yeah.
Whatever. But seriously, where do you see yourself?
Yeah. So it's tough to condense this answer up. It's that one of my biggest aspirations in life was just making a difference.
Yeah.
And my vaccine work, I feel like I've done that.
Sure.
So I feel very content just like bartending, spending time with my friends, like dating my girlfriend, and like being a person.
You're 21. Of course, that's what you want to do right now.
Right. I feel I'm in a very like chill, no high aspirations, like doing my thing. Long term though, I do see myself working more in journalism, especially politics, especially like getting more involved in the aspect of like maybe even Cleveland.com or like, Plain Dealer, kind of like trying to write for more of like the Cleveland outlets and trying to get more involved in that space.
More of a local level.
Yeah,
you can make more of a difference that way.
For sure. Like I write for Lorain County Community College school newspaper, The Collegian.
Okay.
And when I write my stories for them, it's very much like grounded Lorain County like stories.
Sure.
Where I'm reaching out to like local organizations and stuff like that. And I love doing that.
Yeah.
So I see myself in the next like 5-ish years with my degree, with my experience I do have. So I have a great resume.
Yeah.
Obviously. I was in fucking Time magazine, so
sure.
like.
I mean, come on.
Yeah, so I feel like if.
I don't think that's something Trump did. Oh, he went to.
Yeah, no, exactly. But, yeah, I hate that we have that. But, yeah, I think that just in a few years, I see myself working more in like local scene of Cleveland in terms of like the journalism aspect, plain dealer, or like, you know, Cleveland.com, and trying to get more involved in that space. And just being someone who like is involved in the community, you know, just trying to like be part of like the advocacy space, trying to like get involved in like the protest and like the gatherings, and just like be a voice that's like, hey, I'm here to like help promote what you guys are doing. So
is there a news outlet that you feel does exceptional journalism?
Oh, what a good question. I think it's tough because exceptional journalism, I think, is biased.
Yeah.
Where it's clearly biased. Where it's like, this is our bias. And they
really,
open
you think? Because I would say the other way.
Well, I think most people's conception of journalism is moderate, unbiased. Like, you know,
try to be.
Where it's like, you know, your NPR, or like, I mean, not NPR, but like kind of just your global. Like, we're just journalists. We're
writers. Or
I think that for me, the exceptional journalism is like, hey, listen, this is our bias. We believe this, but we're still willing to talk to other people.
Yeah. And
so you can understand what we think.
Yeah.
Here's how this person thinks. I think that's really good journalism, because no one in reality is unopinionated. No one.
You're right.
It's a lie.
To actually admit your bias, lay it out there.
Yeah.
And then move on from there.
Exactly.
Because nobody's not.
Exactly.
Biased,
it is super like a facade to be like, I am like a journalist for CNN, but like I'm a journalist, but blah else. And it's like, okay. Yeah. And if you're like a Cleveland journalist, you might be liberal, you might be right wing. It's kind of like up in the air, because like Cleveland's a more liberal place, but it's also Ohio. I feel like if I was in journalism, I would want to promote or be a part of a place that promoted the idea of like, hey, we want our journalists to be very clear about their intentions and their bias and their political beliefs, and then move forward from there.
Who does that well?
I don't know. It's tough. I think a lot of independent journalists do.
Well,
so like I think that like for me, a lot of like my engagement comes in through like YouTube, and through like online media. So like Crooked Media is really good. I really like Philip DeFranco, and Hassan Piker's very liberal, so I listen to some of him. But yeah, I don't know. I think a lot of like what I engage with politically is just all sides of the spectrum. I just consume a lot of information. So
what conservatives do you?
Well, I listen to Tucker Carlson because he's like the number one conservative speaker, like statistically.
He beat Hannity out finally?
I think so. Yeah. Okay. And also, there's the Daily Wire with Ben Shapiro, Matt Walsh, all of that. There's some of the biggest speakers in the political landscape.
Jordan Peterson.
Yeah, Jordan Peterson. So I engage with them in terms of like just listening to their content and like engaging with what they're doing. And a lot of the speakers I listen to, like, there's a Marxist radio show called Revolutionary Left Radio. Mm-hmm. Rev Left Radio does this really well, where they're like, hey, we're a Marxist thing. Here's a clip from Tucker Carlson and what he's talking about. This is kind of dangerous, like rhetoric he's using. And I'm like, oh, okay, wow, holy shit, I don't like that. But I'm listening to it on a Marxist channel, so I know to be a bit disengaged and be like careful.
It's like Robert Wolf. You're familiar with?
Yeah, exactly. So. And there's like for Rev Left Radio, they were talking very anti-Ukraine rhetoric at one point during an episode where they were like, "Oh, we funnel money into Ukraine, and all Russia's doing is trying to stop NATO, like restricting their trade." And I was like, "Whoa, like that's fucked up." But I knew it was such a biased, like Marxist thing that I was like, I can disengage from this. I can I can cherry pick this a little bit because I know they're functioning from a very biased place. Yeah. So that works well for me at least.
Nice.
So.
All right. Well, I think this is a good spot to end this thing. I mean, it was like 2.5 hours, and it seemed like 15 minutes.
Yeah. I could talk a lot.
Yeah, we could probably go on for a little while. Probably gonna have to cut it off here because I don't know. I don't even know why. But
better to leave the audience wanting more than wanting less. That's the number one thing.
So Ethan Lindenberger.
Yes.
Lindenberger.
Yes, Ethan Lindenberger.
Not Lindenberg, not
Hindenburg.
Hindenburg.
That's the balloon.
No, right? Yeah, the Zeppelin.
Yep.
But yeah, no, dude, thanks a lot, dude. It was, usually we talk about music or whatever, arts, whatever. It was actually really nice talking to somebody that has an intellectual kind of background, you know what I mean, in a subject, and you've been around, you've talked about it, you know quite a bit. It was refreshing. Not saying that any of my other people that were on here weren't,
Sure.
you know, everyone's refreshing really, but it was nice to have this conversation, and I think I'm definitely going to get flagged for this.
Yeah, hell yeah.
Podcast.
Good.
But hey, man, you know, maybe we'll get somebody to think, you know.
Sure.
But dude, no, seriously, thanks a lot, dude. I'm gonna probably stop up the Jukebox and have some beers later on this week.
Monday nights are when I bartend. That's when I'm there. And I would say final note is like for all the things we talked about, and me saying like I try to live a humble, modest, like kind of I do my own thing. Jukebox is fucking awesome.
Yeah,
I love my job there because I get to bartend and be around cool people, and they're very community oriented. So like. That's like that on full display.
Right.
They're so cool.
That whole area right there is really cool with Saucy, and it's like the it's been labeled like the LGBT like area, you know, and they even the walkways. It's kind of like Beatles, but like Abbey Road.
Yeah,
but like rainbow.
It's really cool.
Yeah,
it's really cool.
It's also kind of like Thor, you know, doing the rainbow.
The Rainbow Road. Exactly. Exactly.
No, it's cool. But no, hey. Everyone, check him out at Jukebox, and probably in a few years, you're going to be the top journalist in the world.
Yeah. We'll get there. I've heard people say like if you become like the next fucking giant name, like the next AOC, like bartending into, like, I'll remember you. And I'm like, I'll try. Like I'll try.
All right. Well, hey man, thanks a lot, dude. It was awesome, really fun.
Good.
All right, Sub CLE, we're out.